In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Betterbid, Ms. Crammon, Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. McCracken.
Here.
Mr. Rich asked to be excused. He had a death in the family. Mr. Shepherd. Mr.
Here.
Caldwell. Mr. Rosenthal.
Here.
Mr. Reese.
Yes.
Ms. Bergalia. Chairman Thomas.
Here. Okay, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting, December 18th, 2014.
Move the minutes for regular meeting, November 20, December 18th?
Watch the video.
I'll second.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Resolutions, Walker, ZBA 14-00017.
I move the resolution?
Second.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Middle Bush Reformed Church, ZBA 14-00015.
Move the resolution?
Second.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. And then ANCA, certification of pre-existing non-conforming use.
Move the certification?
Second.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. McCracken.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Under the discussion part of the agenda, February retainer for Mr. Bradshaw, 865. Is there a motion to approve?
I move.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the next matter on the agenda, in our haste to reappoint Mr. Bradshaw, we went out to RFQs last month. We should have waited until you reorganized before we did that. So we went out again. We once again have to interview him if you wish to reappoint him so he can be formally done.
I'm ready.
Right, since it's the only candidate involved and we did do a public interview, do we have to do that again?
Ask him a question. Ask him if he's interested.
Ask me that question.
Yes.
Anybody want to ask a question?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Will you be the attorney that shows up for the firm on most occasions, or will it be someone else?
No, it'll be me, Bob.
Okay.
All right, any further questions? Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Here, extension of time, ZBA 14-00001, minor subdivision.
Yes,
I'm going to step down. I have to step down because this is my firm coming up to do a good job, okay?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, you approved a minor subdivision 7 or 8 months ago. They have not, for some minor reasons, clarifications, have not been able to file the deed. They're this close. We're just ready within a day or so to sign that. The attorney's here just to put his record on the record that he applied so that you can approve it.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, as was just indicated, we're here to get an extension of a previously approved subdivision. It was approved in May 2014.
Is the mic on?
Yes, I'm just not holding it close, I think, sorry. Because of various easements that we had to tender to the township that took a little longer than we anticipated or we would have liked. Those have all been done and approved by everyone who had to review and approve them. We are now prepared to file the deed or record the deed, but it's beyond the 190 days, or getting very close to the 190 days that we need to file it within the approval under the MLUL, so we're asking for an extension of that approval and asking the board to sign the deed so that we can get it recorded.
How much of an extension are you requesting?
The deed, as far as I understand, is prepared and signed, so 30 days is probably more than enough.
So 60 days?
60 days is even more than enough.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
I just need your name, your appearance.
I'm sorry, Peter Gallagher from Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman.
Thanks.
Anything? Any motion?
No, I move that we extend the time for 60 days.
I second.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. McCracken?
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd? Oh, I'm sorry, he stepped down, that's right. Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Central Jersey College Prep, ZBA 14-00020. Site plan with use variance in which the applicant's proposing to construct a gym and sign at Schoolhouse Road, Belmont Drive, Somerset, Block 517.05, Lot 35.11, in an M1 zone. And
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanfrit, appearing on behalf of the applicant. This is an application on behalf of Central Jersey College Prep Charter School, who is a tenant at property located at Schoolhouse in Belmont, Block 517.05, Lot 35.11. This application is to construct a bubble for a gymnasium for the charter school. The Central Jersey Charter School has been in existence since 2006. They lease a portion of that building and are there by virtue of a use variance that was granted by this board since 2008. As the board may recall, there was a time when the charter school was looking to relocate on New Brunswick Road, and that didn't come about. We went through numerous hearings here, and they're back where they originally were on a long-term lease. As such, they want to construct a bubble for a gymnasium. I'm going to go into a little bit of a background so that we can move this application along. Some of this information was information that was provided to you in previous applications. The charter school, based on their charter, has students from grades 6 through 12. Their charter gives them the ability to have a grand total of 340 students. They currently have 313 enrolled in the school. They lease a portion of the building, and the architect will go into what portion of the building is being leased.
Who else is there, Peter?
New Jersey Chinese community who owns the building leases the other half. They have a school also, and they have some other cultural activities. Their school has about 100 students, and they are also there vis-a-vis a use variance that was granted probably in the 1990s.
Several use variances. They've been back several times.
Yeah. There is really no interrelationship between the schools, other than at the present time, there is a small gymnasium, and we'll show you on the plans, in the charter school, and we allow, as part of the lease, the Chinese school gets to use it after school for a couple days a week for their students only for physical activities. We are not looking to, this application does not involve enlarging the school as far as enrollment or numbers. We currently have 54 teachers. That's going to remain the same. Those are the same numbers that we had when we testified before the board many years ago. So this application is strictly to construct the gym. The gym is going to be located on impervious coverage. There has to be some relocation of or reorientation of parking, and that's the testimony we will present this evening. I will have the architect testify. I will have the site engineer testify, and then Mr. O'Brien will present planning testimony since this is a D variance, since schools are not permitted in the zone. Mr.
Could I just
Cos,
ask you one thing, so I'm looking at this from the right perspective? This school, Central Jersey Prep is applying, is the applicant. Is there any proposed use, cross-use of that facility between the prep school and the other facilities that are on the site?
the only thing that goes on now, and it would continue, is from 5 to 7 p.m., the Chinese school uses the small gymnasium for their students. That would continue into the
But
other...
the small gymnasium already exists.
Right, but that's not going to exist,
Oh, so that's going to be removed,
repurposed.
repurposed.
We're going to need, if, that's Jimmy's portion?
No.
The gymnasium?
There is a small, it's like a half-court gym in the charter school side,
Okay.
okay, which will not be needed any longer, and that is being used now.
And then you're going to provide testimony on what that's part of this application
Yeah.
then? Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't part of Jimmy's side and
No,
we'd have to deal with that separately. Okay.
we do not,
Jimmy would be the Chinese school?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry, yes.
Yeah, well, let me ask you one more question. If the
Okay, I just
Chinese
want to be
if the
clear
Chinese-
of the separation.
okay.
So that's all.
When we swear the architect in, we'll go over that.
Oh, can I ask you a simple question? If the Chinese school owns the building, who's going to own the gym that's being built?
We are putting it up with our funds. It will be our gym.
Okay, so there'll be two ownerships then?
Well, it's on the Chinese, it's on this property owned by the Chinese school, but it will be our gymnasium. Pursuant to the lease, we have a right to construct it on the property, and we have a right to use it, and we control it.
Since it's a bubble, also, isn't it, you'll be able to remove it when they leave?
You can deflate it, yeah, and
Right.
remove it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Kosmic?
Yes.
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Mr. Kosmic, what is your occupation?
I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey.
Okay, give the board the benefit of your professional and educational background.
Well, I've testified before this board on several occasions for prior applications. I've been licensed since.
You'll accept, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kosmic, you were retained by the applicant to prepare the architectural plans for this addition to the building. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Can you, I guess perhaps we can, we're going to use these exhibits anyway.
I don't have my glasses, so I can't read the date. Yeah, this one, Z202.
Mr. Chairman, I've taken the liberty to mark 5 drawings, A1 through A5. A1 and A2 are prepared by the site engineer. A3, 4, and 5 are architectural drawings. And before I even go to the architectural drawings, Mr. Kosmic, you're familiar with the subject property and the uses on the subject property, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the engineer's exhibit shows the existing building and the proposed building, and the existing building is broken down into 2 shades of brown, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you identify the independent uses on that building as shown on that plan?
The lighter brown area to the right of the main structure is part of the New Jersey Chinese Community Center, and then the darker brown is the area that is currently occupied by the Central Jersey College Prep Charter School.
Okay, and then the third color, which is like a rust color, is the proposed addition, is that correct?
That is correct, which is consists of approximately a 110-foot by 118-foot air-supported structure, or bubble that we're going to call it, and then another, I think, about a 2,200 square foot vestibule area to transition between the school at a higher level down into the gym.
Okay. Now, can you pull up your architectural drawing and then relate the proposed addition to the existing school and how this would all work?
Yes, on exhibit that's been marked as A3, it's drawing Z-01. It shows a partial floor plan of the central part of the existing school, and it also indicates a dividing line, which is the tenant separation wall that was constructed and approved in a prior application before this board. The air-supported structure, as I stated prior, it was 110 feet by 118 feet. It'll house one basketball court with a small amount of bleacher area on one side of the court, and permanently constructed boys and girls locker rooms on the other side, which also has a small office area for the physical education teacher.
Okay. And how is access gained to this structure?
Access is gained through the rear portion of the area, which was presently a loading dock area that was not being used by either the Chinese school or the charter school. So that area was used to then design a vestibule area so that a transition can be made from the interior part of their main school down about 4 feet in elevation to the grade level, which would house the bubble.
Okay. How are the utilities going to be brought into service the new addition?
We're going to bring all of the utilities in from the existing school. We're going to tap the water from there, and also we're going to probably pump all of the sanitary back into the main school so that we preclude us from having to provide a separate sanitary connection.
Okay, now, you mentioned that there is a dividing wall as a result of previous applications, and you've been involved with this property for a period of time now?
Yes.
Okay, and can you indicate to the board where there is that dividing wall?
The dividing wall is approximately along column line 23, and then it jigs along to the right and then traverses around what is indicated on Exhibit A3 as the new weight room. And also there's a cardio room, I believe. And that was the original tenant separation wall that traversed to the back of the building. That area, which was labeled as a new weight room and cardio room, was what was applied or altered to be a gymnasium, which really is not a functioning gymnasium. It was really a large room with a high ceiling, and we were able to get a half court in there.
And that's what's there today?
That's what's there today.
Okay.
And yes.
And if the board were to approve this expansion, then you would be using that as a cardio room and...
Weight room, or there was a discussion by them to, by the charter school to also maybe convert it to reprogram it for a library.
Okay. The demising wall between the two uses physically separates the Chinese school from the charter school, is that correct?
That is correct. There's no cross exit allowed between the two tenancies.
Okay, and that will continue as a result of this application?
That is correct.
Okay. So other than the vestibule and, by the way, how high is the bubble?
The bubble, I believe, is approximately 30, in the neighborhood of 30 to 32 feet.
Okay.
I'm pulling up, I'm referring to exhibit that's been marked as A5. It's a drawing of Z-03. I believe that the bubble was approximately 32 feet from grade level.
Okay, and the height requirement in the zone is 50 feet?
I believe that is correct.
So we are well under the height requirements of the zone.
Correct.
And that bubble, once it's constructed, will be able to house one full-length, standard-sized basketball court plus bleachers?
Correct, and locker rooms.
And the locker rooms. The bleachers, what kind of seating capacity is there in there?
The seating capacity was calculated at, to be approximately 186 people. There are 2 bleachers, they're about 5, they provide 5 continuous rows of seating. They're 34 feet long. I calculated a 22-inch per person width that yielded 93 people per bleacher section, total of 186 people.
Okay. And is there also room for, if there were participants, there's also room for the players and coaches and things of that nature?
Correct, which I calculated another 30 students and another 13 for security and chaperones, bringing a total of 229 persons
Within the confines of the building? Thank you.
within the confines of the gym.
Okay. Can you tell the board what the exterior is going to look like?
The exterior on drawing that's been marked as A5 is, as I said, it's a gym bubble, white. It's inflated by air pressure that's provided by mechanical units on the other side that obviously have to run continuously to keep the bubble inflated. The transition piece that was designed to allow handicap accessibility between the upper level of the main school to the gym level was designed as a really in 2 parts. One was a larger element, which is the main vestibule, which you reach by a set of stairs, and it has a slight mohawk roof profile. It'll be designed in a glazed concrete block, and they were transitioned or indicated in 2 colors that represent the school colors, which is yellow and purple.
Okay. And the building will be fully handicap accessible, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Including the gymnasium.
Correct. Thank you. I have no further questions.
So I'm sorry, so the shape of this thing is essentially, if you took a basketball and you cut it in half and you put it down, it's like a circle kind of a bubble as opposed to something that's elongated in one direction or the other.
I guess you would describe it like that. I'm not the professional that's responsible for the design of the gymnasium. These gymnasiums, these bubble structures are completely pre-engineered by bubble manufacturers who have their own engineers who design the grade beam structure for the support of the or the tie down of the bubble. They design all the HVAC systems and how to pressurize it. My responsibility is strictly the interior locker room areas and the design of the vestibule to transition between the 2 buildings.
Well, then, can someone testify that that drawing accurately reflects what the bubble's going to look like?
I submitted this
I think
drawing-
that's really what the question is, right, Bob? You want to make sure that that kind of is what we're getting and we're not getting something else?
Well, now, that wasn't really the first question, but now since he tells me he can't tell me what it looks like, I was going to ask Peter if he had somebody here who could testify that tell us that that's what it's going to look like.
Well,
You don't?
No, I don't have anybody here. Mr. Kuzmic has been in communication. I think the drawing depicts the height of the bubble and the shape of the bubble based on the information you received from the manufacturer.
That is correct. I submitted my preliminary plans to the company that the charter school was interested in having bid the project. Their company was called Arizona Structures. They've done hundreds of these types of air-supported structures. I submitted the overall size and geometry and layout, and also forwarded him the preliminary elevations, and he said that he represented to me that fairly represents the geometry of the structure in size and shape.
And if Mr. Shepard wants to interpret it as a half a basketball, it probably looks like a half a basketball. But
All right, we'll have to see what it looks like when it goes up, won't we?
I just want to
When it's
ask,
blown up.
From the applicant's perspective, they better be sure that that's what it's going to be shaped like, because they're seeking site plan approval.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
all of the site plan modifications are predicated on it being those dimensions.
Well, the dimensions are what is a given. The geometry and the shape is what's going to be inflated too, so it kind of accurately represents the shape.
I just want to ask again, since this
Kind of.
property is owned by the Chinese Community Center, they are not going to have any use of this gymnasium at all?
That's not what I said, Mr. Rosenthal. What I said in my opening is that currently the two entities operate completely independent of each other, except for that when we are not using the current little gymnasium that we currently have, we allow the students from the Chinese school to use it on weekdays from 5 to 7. It was the intent in the future, if we are not using the gym between those hours, for the students of the Chinese school to use the gymnasium for that 2-hour period when we're not using it. Those would be weekday nights from 5 to 7, which is what currently is taking place today.
Thank you.
What's the interior floor surface? Rubber?
Right now, I haven't discussed exactly. It's either going to be a wood-type gymnasium floor, or it could possibly be a synthetic floor.
Now, will you have, I forgot what you mentioned at the beginning, someone to testify as to the activities that are planned for the gym?
I could do that. I actually have the principal is here, but basically, the school will use it for physical education classes during the day. It will use it for student assemblies during the day. And again, these are our students, not anybody else's students. They may have on evenings or on a weekend a science fair or that type of event. They do not intend to use this, and we have no problem with inserting a condition that it can't be used for outside rentals of any kind. It's strictly for school purposes. They do have a basketball team now. They do play other charter schools, so there will be some interscholastic basketball games, which normally take place by and large after school. So those are the activities that will take place in this.
And then that would limit or conflict with the 5 to 7.
Well, I said that the Chinese school would not use it if we are using it. If we have a event after school, whether it's a basketball game or something going on, then they do not use the gymnasium.
And you mentioned it's not going to be rented out?
It is not going to be rented out.
So a fair condition would be that it's not going to be used by third parties except for the Chinese school?
And you can even limit it at those times if you want, from 5 to 7.
Okay.
I just had one, there was a comment here about existing bubble having higher arching design in order to reduce snow load. Is the,
That's something that will be discussed with the manufacturer, but that's certainly an option that we'd also have to, the board consider that if it goes to a higher arch design for the issue of snow loading, that it would do that, be allowed. Right now, it was kept at a particular geometry that is their standard bubble design, I'm going to call it, which should handle the snow loads. They specifically designed the HVAC systems and how the heating is done in the bubble to obviously mitigate any kind of snow load that would cause the bubble to deflate.
And if for some reason, just, we're asking for approval of this bubble in this configuration. If we decide for some reason that it has to be higher, we'd have to come back. And I know Mark raised a comment because of the soccer center.
I wonder if, I mean, this is something that the board could discuss. Yeah, I raised it only because we had an application within the last year for the soccer center where they had a bubble that was somewhat of a lower profile, and they came back for a higher profile or higher concave or whatever for snow load reasons. And this one looked somewhat of a low profile,
Yeah.
similar to what the soccer center had. So the thing though is, the height is what, 30-something?
It's approximately, I think on the drawing it says 32 feet. I left my glasses in the
And you
car.
can go up to 50. So one thing that the board might want to consider is, do you really actually want to see it? I mean, if they are going to otherwise comply with everything else and it goes up to 40 feet, do they really need to come back? Especially because it'd still be complying with the building height requirement, and it's a bubble back behind a warehouse building.
How high can the bubble be and still be within the height requirement?
50 feet.
So they have a lot of room to work with.
And I just also want to point out to the board that the 32 feet is from the back side of the building, which is 4 feet lower than the front, which is, I think, the primary elevation that is determined for the height limit of 50 feet. So there's an additional 4 feet of vertical height.
Mark, I did some follow-up on when, just not to belabor the issue, the bubble for the soccer center was a significantly larger bubble, which housed 3, I think it was, soccer fields. And then the other issue with the snow, the issues that they have is that it was not occupied that much during the day, so they lowered the temperatures, which in a way create the problem with the snow. Here, this building will be smaller, and it'll be occupied most of the time, so the heat will be on most of the time.
But what we've heard is
Yep.
there's a chance you might want to go higher.
We may.
And so again, what the board would then need to decide is, do they want to see it again if that happens? Or are they okay as long as you comply within some parameters? For example, you still comply with the building height, do they really want to see it? So that's one of the things the board's going to have to think about.
Okay.
Well, personally, because of where it's located, I'd be okay with having the latitude to go up to whatever they're allowed to go to without another variance. So we're not hearing an application for another 8 or 10 feet on a bubble.
Thank you.
But, you know,
Waste your time.
speaking for myself, not the board.
I am finished with this witness, Mr. Chairman, and we...
Any other questions, or are there more questions for this witness? Okay, we'll open to the public after you're done.
Fine. Mr. Stiers?
Okay, sir, you solemnly swear affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your name for the record.
Craig Stiers.
Mr. Stiers, you're a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey,
Yes.
and your office is located in Somerville.
Yes.
How long have you been so licensed?
We'll accept him.
Thank you. Too long. We have prepared, or you've prepared Exhibits A1 and A2, which depict the change in the site plan, and also you have an aerial of the subject property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go to A1 first?
Sure.
Or actually, A2 is the aerial. I'm sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, go to A2. As I indicated in the opening, the school that we are here for this evening is the school to the left on your building. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you indicate how the school functions now? Where do the teachers park? Where do the students park? How do they get into the building? How does everything work today?
The lower side of the building is what is called the main entrance. Many of the staff park in the front, so there are some spaces allocated for parent drop-off. In the back here, if you see the existing conditions plan, there's currently a bus drop-off here along the front of or actually the back side of the building. There's parking located centrally where the bubble will be located. So essentially, the buses come off Schoolhouse Road, come in, circulate into the drop-off area, and then what they do is they pull out, and then they exit back on the Schoolhouse Road.
Now, the bubble is taking away part of that drop-off area, is that
Correct.
correct? And what have you done to compensate for that?
Well, essentially, if a typical bus is 45 feet long, so if you were to lay out the buses in the existing area, you could pretty much have 5 buses front to back along that area. Essentially, what the bubble is going to do is take away the location of 2 buses. So the three area left over would still be able to have the three buses there. What we would essentially do is just really turn the corner. So there's approximately 90 feet along the side of the bubble. So those 2 buses that are being displaced will be relocated essentially perpendicular. But after that, the flow and everything remains exactly the same. As Peter said, We're not increasing the number of students. Nothing else is really changing other than the bubble itself. So as far as the flow on the site, instead of the buses coming out this way and exiting, they're going to move over a little bit, but essentially same flow in and through the facility.
Okay, and you've been to the site now on at least one occasion or more than one occasion. Basically, the charter school uses the parking area on the Belmont side and the parking area in the back of the building where the current drop-off is that correct?
Right, exactly. It's essentially the area between Belmont and the school, and then the area in the back here, pretty much to the end of the building. The large parking lot to the north is, when you go by there, it's virtually empty, and that would be for the other tenant as well.
Okay, and in the area that the charter school uses, how many parking spaces are there approximately?
Existing or proposed?
Go to both.
What's that?
Both.
I calculated the proposed, that's the reason I asked.
Okay,
So,
proposed then.
I mean, after we put the bubble in, what I've done is I calculated from essentially, again, this point to the south, and then the remaining spaces to the end of the building. And that would be approximately, or will be 100 spaces.
So the school will still have 100 parking spaces?
Yes.
Which obviously is more than adequate for the teachers and more than adequate for any event.
Teachers and the event combined.
Combined.
would essentially total the 100 spaces.
Yeah, a quick question, Peter. How many students drive to school?
There are
I don't know the ages of the,
There are 8 students, and again, this was testified to previously, and it's still the same. There are 8 students who drive to school. They have to get permission. Students can't just elect to drive. They have to get permission, and historically, there's never been more than 8. Also, we did confirm, just to make sure there's no issues, the Chinese school has 100 students. None of them drive. They all are delivered by bus, and they use one bus. So, and their entrance, as Mr. Stires pointed out, is completely separate and apart at the other end of the building. And there are how many parking spaces overall on the site?
There's existing 465, and will be 411 afterwards.
Okay, so there's more than adequate parking for
Right.
both facilities to operate. Also, if, just jumping around a little bit to the staff reports, there is on the side of the Chinese school an outdoor basketball court, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you point out to the board where that is?
It's located actually in the parking lot right in this area. So what it looks like, they removed the striping, put the striping for the basketball court, and put 2 hoops up.
Okay, and did you count that as part of the parking spaces, or did you not count it as part?
I did not.
Okay. There was a comment in the staff reports that we either should fence that in or remove it. The principal spoke to the Chinese school, that parking lot, or that basketball court will be removed. So actually, we're going to be adding in more parking spaces, so that's going to be coming out as a condition of the approval. Can you indicate what we are doing as far as landscaping and lighting?
As far as the landscape, I think one of the comments that Mark had was the show, and we can add this to the plans as a condition, but essentially this area, actually, I could show you on the aerial. This is Exhibit A2. It's a little far for you guys over there, but essentially there's just, it's almost like decorative or landscaping as part of the approval of the original plan. You have miscellaneous trees on the islands that are there now. There's some trees along the face of the building, and then there's some low shrubbery on the western side of the building. But that's the extent of the existing landscaping. So as far as what is being removed when the bubble's put in, there's probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 trees that are being removed. And what we're looking to do is we're buffering along the edge of the bubble, putting some landscaping between the bubble and the existing building, but also putting 5 trees in here just to, try to make sure that, there is a little bit of a gap here coming through that you could potentially see the bubble. So we're putting a few trees in there just to try and buffer it a little bit to get that last remaining spot, I guess you could say.
Okay.
now the locker rooms Is that a permanent structure, or that's under the bubble?
The locker rooms would be inside the bubble. So I guess they would be, somewhat permanent, yes, as far as being inside the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, you have to build walls and stuff.
Correct.
Now, the area where the bubble is located right now is a parking area.
Yes.
There is a light pole in the middle of that parking area currently. That light pole is going to come out.
Right.
Okay. Will you agree to basically do an examination of all of the lighting around our side of the building? And if in that area additional lighting is necessary because of the loss of the pole, we would compensate for it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question from before, the existing lighting is going to remain. There's existing lights all the way down the parking lot. There's an existing light that is going to remain. So the only one that's going to be removed is the one that's in the center of the bubble itself. So we didn't propose anything because we didn't anticipate any problems with ample lighting, but we can check it as one of the comments from the professionals was to check that.
Now, there were certain comments that were generated by the engineering department, the planning department, and Mr. Dominack. After we received those reports, did you have communication with the engineering department?
Yes.
And basically, we can comply with almost all of the comments contained therein, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now with respect to the condition of the parking lot, can you indicate to the board what the condition of the parking lot is right now?
As they've discussed in their, Mark and Julio both described in their reviews, it's getting older, I guess you could say. A lot of the striping has worn off, so what we would do is, what we would prefer to do is fix the areas that are, if there's spots that are in disrepair, to dig them out, have a full depth repair, and then be able to restripe the area.
And these are the 100 parking spaces that we control. In other words, from the, I guess it would be from the south side of the building, all around the perimeter of the building, but we would not touch the parking lot on the other side because that's not our parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. But we would restripe all of the parking spaces in the front of the building, in the back of the building, and make all the necessary repairs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that the comment that Julio had in that regard was that you need to work with him in regard to the portion that, if we're looking at it on the left side, in the back and in the front area, and you can work with him to figure out, there may be some areas that you may need to do more than just patch, because, we don't want to adversely affect the drainage, but
Yes.
you should ask the board to just do that portion and to work that out with Julio.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Dominic. Any other comments? Oh, we do have a application for a sign.
Yes.
Can you indicate to the board where the sign is?
They're looking, right now, if you were to drive by there, you'd see, I guess it'd be somewhat of a cloth canvas sign in the front yard. What we're looking to do is to replace that temporary sign with a permanent sign located in the front yard of Schoolhouse Road. If you looked at the plans, it's on the detail sheet. It's essentially 50 square feet, 5 feet by 10, which would include the columns on either side of it. So the sign itself would actually be somewhat less than the 50 square feet.
Okay, and that sign would be to identify the charter school, and it has nothing to do with the other school?
Correct.
That would be our own identification sign.
Does the other school have a sign as well?
There is a sign in Chinese, I believe.
So it's a secret sign?
I can't understand it.
Right.
I believe it is at, Craig, is it at the corner? I drive by all the time and I started drawing a blank. I
Yes,
think, yeah,
there's a sign
they
right-
have their own sign right at the corner of the property.
Okay, and how big is that sign?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, and we're asking for a sign that's twice as big as allowed?
Well, the message portion, if I am correct, is required to be 25 square feet.
Square feet, right, yeah.
And, I mean, what we've done is we could put this little box of 25 square feet. We got pillars, so we're sort of making it more decorative, but it is 50 feet.
I think the other thing to consider as well is that the reason it's 25 square feet is because the sign, it's related to the use. For schools, you can't have a sign more than 25 square feet. But for this exact site and for this zone, if it was developed for permitted uses like office and warehouse, they could have 100 square feet. So there are a lot of other uses in that area that have up to 100 square foot signs. They're allowed to. This happens to be a school, so they're limited to 25.
That's a good answer he gave. Okay, thanks.
He beat my planner to it, but that's okay.
You passed the test.
You've also had an opportunity to review Mr. Healy's report, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and with respect to any site comments that he had set forth in his report, any, as far as trees and everything else, we will comply with everything in his report, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
I have one before you leave. Pertaining to the bus circulation and the drop-off, the school's at 213?
313.
313.
That's what's permitted, right?
No, 313 is our current count. We are allowed 340. We have 8 buses that come in the morning, 8 buses in the afternoon.
Okay. I had thought you said 2-something. I'm assuming that small of an increase, you can accommodate another bus or two.
Well, there's no increase as far as the number of students.
I know, but
But-
they can go up another 20
Oh, yes, yes.
students. you know.
But if there's 8 buses, probably we don't need any more buses because most buses are 45 to 50 students. It probably would be the same buses.
Let's not make it complicated. I'm just trying to make sure that you
There's
said
enough room.
You can accommodate whatever growth.
We
you're
can
allowed to
accommodate it.
Have
Yeah.
in terms of that, okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien, unless the other board members have any questions. Mr. O'Brien?
He's in the back of the room, you know, we're going to take him a while, Pete. you know.
I've seen that.
I solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do. Kevin O'Brien, O-B-R-I-E-N.
Licensed professional planner?
I still am.
Good. Mr. O'Brien?
Hey, Kev, do me a favor, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
And we'll
Mr.
we'll accept
Okay,
his
thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
There are 2 variances that we are seeking, one for the sign and one for the expansion of the charter school. Is there anything that you would like to add by way of testimony, in addition to the testimony proffered by Mr. Healy for the sign?
Sure. The sign was addressed in Mr. Healy's report, which is dated the 7th of January, 2015. And in it, he says, I quote, "I offer no objection with respect to the variance for sign area. The proposed sign area is consistent with the scale of the site and building and smaller than signage allowed for permitted office and warehouse uses in the M1 zone up to 100 square feet. I agree completely with Mr. Healy and take no exception to his statement."
Okay. Now, with respect to the charter school is there by virtue of a use variance, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and when
This one you
the,
have to work for.
we'll try.
I'll do my best.
Okay, and can you indicate, in your opinion, whether charter schools are inherently beneficial uses?
Schools in general are inherently beneficial uses as found by the state of New Jersey, as are a number of other uses such as hospitals and affordable housing, things that benefit the general welfare of all the citizens of the state and and benefit the state as a whole.
Okay. And can you opine as to the addition of this gymnasium as part of the charter school and as to whether that would also advance the purposes of the school?
It would, because the provision of an athletic facility as well as an assembly facility is one that assists the school in its mission of educating young people, gives them the space to do so, and actually allows them to do a few extra things that they can't do now, such as basketball and compete with other schools.
Okay. And do you have an opinion as to whether the variance can be granted consistent with the municipal land use law?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
The municipal land use law in two places does have references to this application. And under 40:55D-2, under item A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Item G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And this application is consistent with those passages by providing an indoor assembly and athletic facility for a school, which is an inherently beneficial use.
Okay. Does this application, in your opinion, have any negative or detrimental impacts?
No, and as an inherently beneficial use, one uses the four-step Sika balancing test, and I suspect that the board is quite familiar with that process. So allow me just to summarize it by saying that when you weigh the detriments of the application versus the benefits of the application, I cannot identify any detriments of this application upon the neighborhood, the area, or the township as a whole, and I believe that the benefits outweigh those unidentifiable detriments.
As a result of that, do you have a conclusion as to whether the board can grant the use variance for the addition of the bubble?
Yes, I believe that since there are no detrimental effects caused by the proposed facility, and there are public benefits by providing an indoor assembly and athletic facility for a school which is inherently beneficial, I would conclude that I believe that the application can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I have no further questions.
Any board questions? If not, that's your
Bob?
witness, right?
All right,
Yeah.
the question I have, when they have competitive events, when are those events usually held?
I had indicated, most of the time they are after school.
Okay, will the traffic from those events, I assume parents come there as well as buses?
If there is another school that is coming for an event, obviously the other school will travel by bus. There will be some parents that will be coming to the event. And I think as testified to by Mr. Stiers, there's adequate parking on site for both the faculty members, if they're still there after school, as well as for the people who would come to visit the event.
I guess I just have a minor concern. Those events will probably end during the evening rush hour. I mean, there's a lot of office factories there.
Right.
So I'm wondering what kind of effect that would have.
They may overlap the rush hour because these will start after school that's out. You've got to allow travel time for the other school to get here. So typically, they're not starting until 4 o'clock or so, give or take. Give a 2-hour event, that's 6 o'clock, you're at the tail end of rush hour. So I don't see a negative effect.
My obligation to ask those questions.
Yes, sir, it is.
That's your final witness.
That's my final witness.
We'll open to the public before we get into any other discussion. So is there anyone out there who would like to ask a question of any of the witnesses concerning their testimony or make a statement concerning this application? No? Then we'll close. Any comments or questions, concerns, or whatever from the board?
Yeah. I'll make a motion.
I have just one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wanted to talk about the height issue, and I think that we don't need to come back to review that height issue for the bubble.
Well, I was going to include something about in the motion,
Okay.
so, because I agree with that.
Before your motion, I have one or two small things.
Sure.
I'd like to be sure that should the charter school leave for another site or cease to operate, that something is in place for this facility, whether the condition be that it be removed. I want, this facility, in my view, goes with the Central Jersey Charter School,
Correct.
separate from the rest of the uses of the other building. So I'd like to be able to say that the next person, if there is a next person or facility that uses it, needs to have some sort of an approval or guidance as to what the uses are that go into that, because you're building an open space facility that could be conceivably turned into a catering hall by the other facilities.
My
I don't know how I'm wording this correctly.
Yeah, I understand your concern. Our application is solely for the use of this as an accessory to the charter school for a gymnasium. And that's what you are approving. If you want to put some other language in there to tighten it up, that's fine. We don't have a problem with that, because if our lease runs out and we leave, you're probably going to have a change of tenant, and Mr. Dominack or whoever the zoning officer may be at the time is going to have to deal with that issue also.
Yeah, I would think it'd be appropriate if there was a change of tenant, even in name, that they need to come back to the board for the use. To
Well,
explain.
my thought was that I was going to say that they can have it, but when they leave, they got to remove it.
What if it's another charter school who wants to keep, that may be a little bit harsh. I mean, I think we can come back to the board if if this tenant leaves and a subsequent tenant wants to keep it, they would have to reapply. But I don't think to force them to remove it, when it could still be beneficial to a subsequent tenant, subject to your approval, would also make sense.
Which would include the Chinese school.
They would have to come and
Right.
They're not a charter school.
but they're not a charter school, so.
What are they?
They're a Chinese school.
Okay.
Well, I would think it'd be appropriate to say any tenant other than this specific charter school that wants to use that has to come back to this board.
Okay, but what happens if the next tenant that comes in is a catering hall, and
They need to
they
come
don't
here.
want to do it, and then it sits there and falls into disrepair, or they say, it's costing me a lot of electricity to keep this thing up and inflated. Let me just pull the plug on it and let it fall down to the ground. I'm not real excited about that situation.
They wouldn't be able to do that because our construction code official would issue a violation in that we have property maintenance and code requirements. It has to stay in good repair, and they couldn't just deflate it and leave it open because then it wouldn't be safe. There'd be a construction code issue because they're doing construction in there with locker rooms and everything else.
Okay, so see, this is the problem with having a tenant coming in to seek this variance, is somebody lets it deflate. Let's say now the owner of the property lets it deflate. Can you actually enforce that ordinance against the owner of the property, even though he was the one that got the variance?
Absolutely,
Yeah, the owner has also signed the application,
yeah.
Yeah, but the
see.
owner of who?
the owner of the property.
So the Chinese school owner who owns the property
Correct,
has signed the application?
Oh, they had to,
yeah.
yeah.
Because what if the charter school company that owns the charter school goes bankrupt?
Well, then they're not going to, no, that's what we're saying is that if this charter school is not using it for the uses as prescribed, they need to come back. If anyone else wants to use it for any purpose whatsoever, in fact, if the Chinese Community Center wants to use it for a different use than those couple hours, they need to come back just for that. Because
No, but this goes to what he was saying is if they're gone and it just gets deflated and lays there, who's responsible then?
The owner.
the property owner is responsible for it. We can enforce property maintenance and construction code against the property owner. They have a duty, as per the law, to maintain their property.
The other thing, and I don't know if this is a condition, but I think it needs to be clear, and we'll make it clear here at a public hearing, and I'm sure you'll agree, and the tenants and the owners need to understand, we're approving an accessory use to the charter school, if it gets approved. We're not approving an accessory use to the Chinese Community Center, who, in my mind, have no rights to that facility other than what the charter school may give them between 5 and 7 on weeknights. And I would say, go even further to say that I'd consider the charter school responsible for enforcing the conditions of the approval when the Chinese Center is using the facility.
I understand your concern, I understand the issue, and we accept that responsibility, and it is only going to be used by them during those specific times, and they need to use it within the parameters of those times in a manner for physical education and nothing else.
I think, I believe that you do understand it, because I know you know a lot of the history of the whole thing, so maybe you can appreciate the concerns.
Is someone here from the Central Jersey College Prep Charter School?
Yes.
Could they come forward
Sure.
and acknowledge that they understand?
Okay. Sir, if you raise your right hand for me, solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth.
I do.
State your name, spell your last name for me.
Tarkan Topçuoğlu, last name spelled Topcouglu.
Tarkin, you're the principal of the school?
Yes, I,
Okay, and you've been sitting here while all these discussions have been taking place,
correct.
and you've also had discussions with Jimmy Wang, who runs the Chinese school.
I did.
And you and I discussed all of the representations that I've made to the board this evening concerning how this building is going to be used in the future, the bubble, is that correct?
Correct.
And Jimmy Wang understands that he is allowed to use it only for basically physical education from 5 to 7 when you are not using it.
That is correct.
And you understand that he cannot use it for any other purposes.
That's correct.
And you understand that the chairman and the rest of the board is not going to be too happy if they find out that something is going on that property by the Chinese school, which is not allowed. You understand that?
I do.
Okay, and
And that you're going to be responsible for enforcing that?
Yes, I will be responsible.
Perfect.
okay.
All right, unless you
Nice
have any
growth.
other questions or other board comments or concerns, we might be ready for a motion.
Okay, I move that we grant the Central Jersey College Prep Charter School a variance to permit the erection and use of a bubble facility for use by the school as an accessory use, subject only to the only other party that may use it is the Chinese school located on the same property between the hours of 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock on weekdays for physical education purposes when the Central Jersey College Prep Charter School is not using it. The variance is also subject to the requirement that the bubble itself be no higher than 50 feet tall in terms of its total construction height, and that the property not be used or not be rented or otherwise allowed for use by third parties either during the week or on the weekend, and that in the event that the Central Jersey College Prep Charter School leaves the facility at 17 Schoolhouse Road, that any subsequent user of the bubble that will be erected there, they must come before the board to seek use of that bubble for their proposed use of the facility.
Sign variance.
On the sign variance, and that they be granted a variance to erect a sign that is 50 square feet.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Anybody have any comments? Full board?
Mr. Johnson, 4. Mr. McCracken? 4. Mr. Shepherd?
4.
Mr. Caldwell?
4.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Simply Yoga, ZBA 14-00018, use variance and site plan which the applicant's proposing a yoga studio and a single-family dwelling at 24 Sycamore Place, Kingston, Block 5.02, Lot 152.04, in the R20 zone. This has been carried from January 8th without any further notification.
Mr. Chairman, just two administrative things. Every member who is sitting up here who did not attend the last meeting has signed the affidavit that they've watched or listened, so they are eligible to vote if by some miracle we get to a vote this evening. In addition, there was one additional report that was provided to you. That was the Historic Commission report, so that is in front of you, and it was sent to you. That wasn't included in the original packet from several months ago.
Okay, anytime you're ready.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. We appeared last month and started this application. This is an application for a use variance and site plan for a yoga studio and a residential dwelling. The residential dwelling is a permitted use at property known as 24 Sycamore Place in Block 5.02, Lot 152.04. When we were here last month, we started the meeting, and to refresh the board's recollection, we presented the testimony of Mr. Wilkes, our architect, who described both the condition of the existing dwelling on the subject property, what he has done to start to restore the property, what the proposal is for the property for that building should the variance be granted, and also the plans for the single-family dwelling. He also dealt with the outbuildings in the property, certain of which are going to remain and be restored, certain of which were going to be removed. And in essence, that was the testimony that was presented by Mr. Wilkes. He was questioned by members of the public at the last meeting. This evening, I have here 4 witnesses that still remain. One of the owners of the subject property is going to be my next witness, and I'm going to go through these so that the members of the public, if they have questions, can direct the questions to the appropriate witnesses. She will be describing the operations. I will also have the testimony of the site engineer, Mr. Ardman, who will deal with the site plan. I will also have our traffic consultant, who is Mr. Dean, and then I have our planner, Mr. O'Brien. So that's where we intend to try to get to this evening.
Maybe we can set a few ground rules. It would be probably a miracle to think we're going to finish. So I would like to do this one witness at a time, so that if we need to recess or carry this, we'll have heard the witness and had the opportunity to question the witness all in the one night. So we're not carrying over the questioning period to a future date.
So that means the public will get a chance to ask questions after each witness?
After each one tonight, so that we're not hanging for questions. And then, of course, for the benefit of the public, when all testimony is completed, all witnesses have been questioned, everything is finished as far as the presentation goes, you will have a chance to make a statement. We'll be dreaming if we get to that point. We'd be dreaming to think we'll get there tonight, but we'll see.
After last night, I hope we don't have to go that far tonight.
Yeah.
We won't.
One other point of order, if I can, and I apologize to Mr. Bradshaw. I had a list of the exhibits. I don't remember where we left off. Do you have that list?
Yeah.
Okay.
You would be starting with 8.
A8?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bradshaw. Nagisa Manabi.
Mr. Lanford, before we start, I have a question about something that's, okay, actually, I have two questions about the application that I think was well, I know it's handled by your office. It says on Part C application form, it says, the yoga studio currently exists on Route 27 and serves the Kingston community. This location is more appropriate. This use will better preserve the land than a single-family subdivision of 5 to 6 lots with a road. So, is it what you're saying here that that they could, the people who own this property, could subdivide this property into 5 or 6 lots with a road on this property?
Yes, and Mr. Ardman, when we get to him, actually does have a plan for a subdivision to demonstrate that.
Okay, all right. So, and that wouldn't require them to come back to the zoning board or the planning board?
No, we would have to go to the planning board, because that would be a subdivision. It would be a conforming application, and that would go to the planning board.
All right. Second question I have is I read and I had this question last time, but I didn't know I had it. I read the Reynolds Group plans, and they identify the property as owned by Mr. Gaki? Or
When the application, or when the plans were prepared, he was the owner of the property. My client now owns the property, and I'll have her testify to that.
There you go. There's 2 questions answered before we even start.
I'm doing good tonight, then. All right, Ms. Manabi.
Okay, if you raise your right hand for me, solemnly swear affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
And spell your last name for me.
Nagisa Manabe, M-A-N-A-B-E.
Thanks.
Nagisa, you are the owner of the property along with your husband?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes,
and
we are.
When did you purchase the property?
On September 30th
Of last year?
of last year.
Okay. And after you purchased the property, you retained Mr. Wilkes to start to rehabilitate the dwelling, and that's what he testified to last month?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you currently reside?
We have a home in Bayhead, New Jersey, which is at the Jersey Shore. And then on the weekends when we're at the studio, I stay with my parents who live in Princeton.
Okay. And you are one of the owners of the yoga studio?
Yes.
Okay. And how many owners are there?
There are 3 owners, myself and Carol Cook and David Thurn, who are also here tonight.
Okay. And you currently own and operate a yoga studio where?
At the Kingston Shopping Center. We've been there since 1998.
Okay. Have you been the owner since 1998?
No, I've been the owner for the last 7 years.
Okay. And when did you first have experience with that yoga studio? Were you there at the beginning?
I started taking classes there in 2001. Carol and David started taking classes right from the beginning, so 1998.
Okay. And can you briefly, how much space do you rent at the current facility?
It's approximately 3,000 plus square feet.
Okay. And since 1998, that studio has been at that location?
Yes, it has.
Okay. And what is yoga?
Yoga is really, it is a movement and breathing and exercise designed to give you better body mobility and strength, and quiets the mind, and and helps you to maintain overall good well-being.
Okay. And your studio now operates on Route 27, and how many days a week does it operate?
It's a 7-day-a-week school, a yoga class school.
Okay. And you conduct classes there, so people come at specific times for classes?
Correct.
Okay. And when do you have classes?
So on Monday through Friday, we have classes at 9:30 and noon, and then we have a class at 5:30 and then 7:15. On Fridays, we actually only have the 3 classes. Our last class is the 5:30 class.
Because instead of doing yoga Friday at 7 o'clock, they're drinking wine instead of doing yoga. Is that
I can't really testify to that.
okay? Do you have classes on weekends?
We do. We have a class at 9 o'clock, and we have a class at 11 o'clock. And in the afternoons, we sometimes have special sessions of classes, and then we have an evening class on Sunday evenings.
Okay, and did you, at my request, compile the average attendance at these classes for the last 2 years?
Yes, we actually have records going almost all the way back to the beginning, where we can certainly show and demonstrate how many students have been coming into the studio every year. What I provided to Peter was just the average number of students in each class, 7 days a week, for the last 2 years. So that's the actual count based on what the teachers have submitted based on their attendance records.
I'm going to mark this A8, and I have a handout so each of the board members can review it.
Most of the teachers of the classes are here, so.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay, when you say that you have records, how do you keep records? The students sign in when they show up for class? Is that how it works?
Yep, they sign in, and then each of the teachers actually makes a count at the end of the class. It is very much of an honor system, but really at the end of the class, each teacher just makes a count of everyone who's attended the class and submits a record at the end of each month.
Okay, and again, just as a brief overview so we can explain this to the board, even though it's fairly self-explanatory, your classes are at 9:30, your Monday morning class at 9:30 averages 3 students, and then that same class on Tuesday is 11, and then 10, Thursday 15, and then Friday back down to 5.
Right.
So you just follow the days right across. So looking at this, your weekday classes, the most students that you generally have on a weekday are 11 or 12 students. Is that fairly accurate?
That's right.
And you do have a larger attendance on the Saturday and Sunday classes?
That's right.
Okay. Why is that, you know?
I think it's just that everyone has a really busy schedule, and the weekends are the time when people feel that they can most likely devote 90 minutes to a quiet yoga practice.
Okay. And you sort of answered my next question. The classes are approximately 90 minutes long?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And when you have this chart here and it says you have 21 students or 6 students or 12 students or 9 students, does that generally, to your knowledge, mean that you have 21 cars showing up for your classes or 12 cars or 6 cars, or do people come in groups for these classes?
So we have many folks that come because they're friends. They come 2 in a car, or couples, husband and wife, who take classes, or mother daughter, that sort of thing. So we don't generally have the same number of cars as students.
Okay. And usually, if a class lasts an hour, for example, the 9:30 class lasts till 11 o'clock, does anything happen after class, or do people just up and leave?
No, 90 minutes is already a big time commitment, so what we find is that people generally just slip their shoes back on, put their coats on, and then they leave.
Okay. Your present facility, and I know Mr. Wilkes testified at the new facility, there are no locker rooms. People don't come in and change or get dressed or take showers or anything like that.
No, there's no shower facilities, there's no locker room. It's really just leave the shoes at the door and come into class.
Okay. And is there any equipment that is used in yoga classes?
Yoga mat, some blocks, a strap, and that's about it.
Okay. And are those provided by you, or do students bring those?
Most of that equipment if you can call it that, is provided by the studio, although many people like to use their own mat, and so they'll bring a mat with them.
Okay. How many instructors do you have at the facility?
I believe there's 12 regular instructors, and then we have a number of folks that substitute teach from time to time.
Okay. And are your instructors trained?
Yes, they are. All of them go through an initial 200-hour Yoga Alliance training program. Then they register with the Yoga Alliance. And in our case, all of our instructors have many years of experience, so we feel very comfortable. We've never had a problem with our teaching and never had any issues with our students, and that's since '98. So it's a long history of safe practice.
Okay. And you've been at your present facility 17 years.
That's right.
Why are you looking to relocate?
Well, many of you are residents of the area, so I'm sure you know this. That center has been there the whole time, and it's been, it was a quieter center before. We are now really close to the Sushi Palace, which is fantastic because it's a great little sushi place, but it is quite noisy, and so it makes for more disruption to our classes. Also, we're right next door to Friendly Rentals, and unfortunately, as part of their business, they run a lot of equipment, and so the noise and the gasoline fumes from the equipment is also somewhat disturbing. So what we find is that we're really looking for a place that's quieter than the place we're in, and hoping to relocate to a place that will give our students a better, more peaceful experience.
Now, where do most of your students come from?
They really come largely from the neighboring area. I mean, we have folks coming all the way from throughout Franklin Township. We have some folks coming from South Brunswick, West Windsor, and of course Princeton to the south. So really just the whole sort of circle around that area, extending all the way over to Rocky Hill and up north to around here.
If the board were to grant the variance to allow you to move the studio to the new facility, would you be keeping the classes at the same time?
We would very much like to keep the classes at the same time. Those are literally the same schedules that we've had since the beginning, and we've never changed them. So we do know that those are the times that are most convenient for the area, the community students.
And are you looking, or would you be looking to increase to have more classes?
No, I don't think that there's any desire to increase the number of classes.
And if the board were to grant an approval, would you be comfortable with a restriction that would limit you to the classes that you are currently conducting at the times that you are currently conducting them?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, Mr. Wilkes, when he was here last month, testified that there is a capacity in the new studio for about 34 mats.
Right.
Do you envision that you will have that many students at any one
That is
session?
That's a pretty packed class, and would be very unusual. And I, generally, if that happens, it tends to be on a Saturday. I've never had that many students during the week.
Okay.
But it would be very unusual, and as we earlier testified, the average is a much lower number. It's really in the low teens.
Okay. I had asked you, since I don't know how much familiarity any of the board members have with what goes on in a yoga class, to have you take some photographs of a typical session, and did you in fact take some photographs of a session that took place in January of this year?
That's right. I took some classes of pictures of Carol Cook's classes on January 4th, and this gives you a very good representation of a well-attended Sunday class. So this is on the high side of what we would expect to see on a weekend.
Okay. I will mark that A9, and I believe I only have, and it's a set, Mr. Bradshaw, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 photographs plus the cover, and I will mark that as A9, and I think I have about 6 or 7 of these, so I'll spread them out amongst you.
I think so.
Now, Nagisa, as part of this application, you are also proposing to construct a dwelling to the rear of the property, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And that dwelling would be for yourself and your husband, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you would move from, or at least live here part-time?
Yes.
Okay, and
My husband's a professor at Rutgers, and so the Kingston location is a very easy commute for him, so certainly preferable than driving from Bayhead.
Okay. Now, when we designed the studio and designed the parking for the vehicles, the parking lot was able to hold 20 vehicles. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, I think it is 20, is that right? 22? 22.
22.
22.
And do you feel comfortable with that number, that can adequately handle your busiest days?
Yes.
Okay. And in looking at the site plan for the subject property, you have basically an L-shaped or flag lot-shaped piece of property which shows the studio with the parking behind it, and then your dwelling, and then you have a large area, if you're looking at the property, to the right of it behind certain residential dwellings. Is that correct?
Yes.
What's your intent with respect to that open space?
Oh, we were going to leave it that way. It's really beautiful, and we think that it just adds to the quiet nature of the space. So our plan was really to build the two buildings and stop there.
Would you be comfortable with a restriction that limited you to building those two buildings?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have another question for you while Peter's trying to find the next thing he needs to look at.
Yes.
Nagisa, do you teach there as well?
I do. I do actually work in Washington, D.C. during the week, so my ability to teach at the studio is really limited to the weekends. But
Okay.
I do teach.
Okay, and you have basically 3 primary teachers plus other teachers, is that how it basically works?
No, we have 12 regular,
Primary.
primary teachers, and they each have classes that they've been teaching for, on average, 7 or more years.
Okay. And the area in the back of the property that's on the site plan is basically your dwelling, and there is a parking area back there for the dwelling, the 10 and the other 18 plus 2 handicap spaces are for the school itself, or the studio itself, is that correct?
Right, that's right.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Okay, board questions.
If you were limited to 20 people in a particular class, in other words, you weren't really, your ability to conduct the class was limited to no more than 20 people, how would you deal with that?
20 is a low number, I'll be honest. I really do prefer to have the ability to go up to 30, because when we have weekend classes, they can be that size. Historically, when we have hit capacity, we've turned folks away, and that's what we would have to do in this case. We just put up a simple little sign that says, sorry, please come to the next class, and our students are fabulous. They really do come back, so that's really what would happen. So they drive in, find that they can't get into the class, and then they'd have to leave.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could. I guess I'm trying to, related to that question, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, there's space for 33 yoga mats, and you'd indicated that 20 would be tight, so, you'd like to go more than 20. So you have space for 33, you have, at least in the evenings, back-to-back classes, and then presumably, at least looking at the photos here in the larger classes, it looks like you had, do you have 2 instructors for those larger classes?
No, there's generally one class. If we get to that 20 number, oftentimes another teacher will be in the room anyway taking the class, so they might assist, but generally there's just one instructor.
And then during the instructions, is there any administrative staff in the building?
Oh, no, there's nothing like that. There's no need for it.
Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is you do have the situation where, at least in the building, you can accommodate up to 33 students, and there's at least one teacher, so you have 34 people. And then you have back-to-back classes, but then you have only 20 parking spaces to accommodate that. I can understand where if you're in a shopping center, that may not be a problem. But if you're on a small site where you only have 20 cars, unless I hear some more testimony either from yourself or from the site engineer or the traffic engineer, I'm seeing a parking problem.
Okay, I just, going back to the average though, or even the high number of the average, it's really only about 15.
But the question was,
If it
the
happens
question
to
was,
be
if
that.
you have over 20, you
Uh-huh.
have up to 33, which is what the building would accommodate. The
Right,
building
well,
plans, let me finish.
sure.
The building plans that were submitted show 33 mats.
Okay.
And then based on the testimony that you gave, you have in the evening, at least one situation, Monday through Friday, where you have back-to-back classes.
Right.
So you could have up to 33 people coming, 33 people leaving, within a relatively small period of time, and you have 20
Right.
car spaces.
So maybe if you could just take a look at the chart with the average class sizes, you'll see that 15-minute gap is between that 5:30 class and the 7:15 class, and you'll see that even if you add up the two numbers at the bottom, it never really exceeds that 20 because the 7:15 class is really lightly attended. So we've never really had that experience where there was sort of an overflow or a difficulty. As you can see, even in the maximum case, that's 9 plus 6, so it's 15 on average. I've never experienced that. So I guess it's theoretically possible, but it's never happened in, the 17 years we've had the studio. Because the 7:15 class is really generally just a handful of folks, because it ends pretty late, and so folks tend to prefer the 5:30 class, so that's the bulk of our students.
Okay, 'cause I used to, I think there's a little bit of, I think we have to be careful somewhat relying upon how your operation functions now within a larger shopping center versus how it's going to operate on this site. Because, you had mentioned putting up a sign. You put up a sign in a shopping center, it's no big deal. Put up a sign at your entrance on Sycamore, I don't know if that's going to work as well. The cars are still coming. I don't know if somebody drives into your site and they find there's no parking, does the site allow for that? Perhaps maybe the traffic engineer or the site engineer can explain a little bit more of how the site is going to function based on, what they've been told by the applicant, what the testimony that they've heard. But I'm hearing more use in the building than can be accommodated in the parking lot.
You want the traffic engineer?
We can get an answer. We'll get you an answer to that, Mr. Healy.
Any other questions? All right, we'll open to the public. Is there anyone who would like to ask questions for this witness concerning her testimony? All right, since you're all the way up, we'll start, and then we'll work toward the front.
And other people can line up behind her, sort of get in position to ask her a question?
When you start, we'd like your name and address.
Turn the mic on.
Ma-
Turn the
make sure
mic
you're-
on.
And the mic is picking you up.
On? No?
Yep.
Thank you.
You have to put your mouth very close to the speaker. Right, good.
Okay. Hi, my name is Meredith Rogers, and I have two questions. The first one...
Address, please, Mr. Chairman.
Your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. 17 Laurel Avenue, Kingston, New Jersey. So I have two questions. My first one is regarding your application. You stated in Part C that the yoga studio currently exists on Route 27 and serves the Kingston community, and you specifically put Kingston, not Franklin Township. And I was just wondering what percentage of your clientele is from Kingston itself, roughly?
I couldn't honestly say offhand because I haven't coded Kingston versus Franklin Township versus South Brunswick. There's never been a need, but if there was a need to come back with that information, I could certainly give you percentages of the students in the database, and I could give you the exact number by zip code, since I work for the post office. That would probably be the easiest way to do it.
That's true.
There's more people. It's not.
So my second question is, so you picked 24 Sycamore, which is in the middle of a residential zone. Why didn't you look at some place on 27, which is pretty much our business zone, like Tuscan Hills? It's a beautiful open space. It has a huge parking lot. Did you even consider something like that?
We certainly did consider it. Do you know what the asking price for that building is? It's $1.2 million. So, I mean, that's quite ambitious for a yoga studio. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. You know, we're a very modest operation, and as you can see from the numbers, it's a pretty modest business. It's really not a business that's intended to make lots of money. It's really just about having a place for people to take classes. So I think that's a little bit beyond our means, to be honest.
Okay, and so you thought going into the middle of a residential zone was a good idea?
No, I didn't really think of it that way. The property is surrounded on two sides by the quarry, and the front side of the property is faces a schoolyard.
Really, one side by the quarry. You have a neighbor on each side. You have a school
Now,
in front of you.
wait now.
Sorry, this is
You stop asking
Yep,
questions
no
now.
problem.
All right,
Sorry.
good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
My name is Barry Pavlak. I live at 35 Laurel Avenue, which is at the corner of Sycamore and Laurel. You're a professional marketing person, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And that's your job in Washington?
Yes, it is.
And this business is a profit-making business?
It didn't make very much money last
Is
year.
that, is the intent of this business to make a profit?
Not really, no.
No, it's not a profit-making business.
It does not make much of a profit.
I understand that part.
It's not.
But
That's not
as-
its intention.
As a
no.
professional marketing person,
Mhm.
would you not intend to make a profit running this business?
You're asking, I work for the United States Postal Service. I'm the Chief Marketing and Sales Officer for the Postal Service, and you probably know that the Postal Service also doesn't have that great a financial picture. So I don't know if that's the question you're really asking me.
No.
Okay, so what are you trying
My
to get
question
at?
is, as a
Mhm.
professional marketing person who owns a business,
Yes?
is it not your intent to maximize your profits?
No, it's not.
Okay, well, then that answers my question.
I'm
And
sorry,
it
as it
doesn't
relates to the
relate
yoga
to
studio,
then-
no, that's not. As it relates to my profession, of
Should I
course.
then assume you're not trying to maximize students?
No, that's right, you shouldn't assume that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next.
Good evening. My name is Liz Chase, and I reside...
Make sure you
Talk to the mic.
Right close to the mic.
Real close to the
Okay.
mic.
Liz Chase, and I reside at 49 Laurel Avenue. I've lived there for 46 years, and my property abuts the property that's in question here. We have a joint property line. My question was also very similar. My first question was, what prompted you to purchase a property in a residential neighborhood to operate a business venture, and wouldn't have been more advantageous to you to get a commercial designation that was already in place rather than attempt to insert yourself into a historically quiet area, thereby compromising the residential integrity?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
What prompted you to purchase a property that's in a residential community to operate a business?
So when I looked at the property, because 3 sides of the L-shaped property is not residential, I didn't perceive it to be a solely residential area. I looked at it and I said 2 sides of it are the quarry, the front-facing side faces the schoolyard, and so while I do agree there is residential use around me, or around our property, frankly, the part of the property that faces many of the residences, I'm not even proposing to develop. And so I really mostly contemplated the fact that the proposal is to have the yoga studio right across the street from a schoolyard, and although the school is abandoned, I mean, it is in fact used as a park, and I frankly didn't think that the use of the yoga studio was that different from the park use that's right across the street. And so I thought it might be possible to ask the board for a zoning variance, and I thought it would be a lovely place for a yoga studio because it is a very quiet use, and our students are very quiet. I mean, they just are. You know, that's the
Well-
notion of yoga.
Why has no mention been made of the dwellings that are on the fourth side of your property, of which there are 5 residences, all on Laurel Avenue, which are at least 80 or more years old, and the residents of those properties have all been there on average of 30 years.
Okay, we
And
still
only
need to
2 sides of the property are owned
keep
by
to
trap
questioning as opposed to making a statement.
I said, why
You get
has
a
no
chance to
mention
do
been
that
made
later.
of the properties that would be directly impacted by the studio and the parking lot and the lights that will be in the parking lot,
Can
illuminating
you
the
put
parking
those
lot?
in the form
I
of
think,
questions?
I think the question, I think there's going to be
No, I
a
said,
presentation by the
Why
site
has
engineer.
no mention been made of that?
There's going to be a presentation by the site engineer who's going to
Okay.
present the physical development of the site, where the parking lot is going to go, the lighting and the landscaping, things of that nature. So it sounds like perhaps your question might be more pointed towards, better suited for him.
Also, ma'am, what you have to understand is that we get big maps.
Right.
And on those big maps are all those houses that you're talking about on the one side of the property.
But no one's
So,
mentioned
well, they don't really have to be mentioned by him because he's presenting a case. We look at these pieces of paper and we go actually to the site, so we know where all the houses are. So it's not as if you're being ignored or forgotten about. It's just that it really isn't the time for him to mention that.
Okay.
All right.
It seemed as if no mention was ever going to be made of the fact that on one side of her property, there are residences. And I wanted to bring that to the attention. I guess I will leave the traffic question to someone else, or ask the site engineer that question. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Much better.
Jim Diaforley,
75.
32 Sycamore Place. Just have a couple questions. I'm a little confused with, you've been in business since
Talk into the
1998?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you just mentioned that
Closer to the mic, Jim.
you're not interested in making a profit.
I didn't say that I was not interested in making profit. I said it's not the primary objective of the yoga studio.
Okay. And again, I've got nothing against making a profit. I'm in business and, you know, I'm in sales, so I get it. But I'm just trying to, in terms of growth, you've been in business since 1998, it's been successful, so you've either grown or you've increased your rates, right?
I've never increased the rate since 1998.
Okay. So you've
And
maybe
we've
brought
pretty
down
much
cost. I mean,
had-
you've been able to stay in business.
We've been able to stay in business largely on the back of just very dedicated students who come to us every week.
Right. So in this new environment, if it goes through, you indicated you wouldn't be looking to add
No.
additional classes. You
No.
would be willing to limit the class sizes, okay?
I'd
So-
like to have the ability to have the approval for the amount that we ask for.
Okay. So I guess from a business perspective, okay, putting everything else aside, it's obvious from everyone here that we're opposed to this, but the point is, where's the revenue going to come from to recoup what you're spending for the property, putting in what you have to put in, and you're indicating that you don't really, you know, making a profit isn't the main objective. Where's it all going to come out in terms of dollars and cents? Is it going to be worthwhile for you to do this?
Sure, because my husband and I are going to live there.
Okay.
So it's a lovely property, and it will be our primary residence once the house is built. And we think it's a lovely property, and we don't mind having the yoga studio next door because we like all of these folks that are here representing the studio. They're lovely people, and
Okay.
they're our friends, and that's what we enjoy about teaching yoga and enjoying it is the community that's part of it. And it's not, I don't want to say it's of no consequence, because if it lost a lot of money, that would be problematic, but as long as it covers its costs, we're happy to be in business, mostly so that we can enjoy the community of yoga with people that we think are like-minded, want to stay in shape, want to have a peaceful practice, want to practice on a regular basis. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we need to identify his clients.
Yeah, you can ask that right away if you want.
Gerald Muller, Miller, Porter and Muller. I'm attorney in Princeton. Represent Elizabeth Romano. She is the contract purchaser of 26 Sycamore, which is immediately to the east. Am I close enough to the mic?
Yes, you are.
Okay, that's fine. Just a few questions. First, you had indicated that you thought in some fashion that the yoga studio was compatible with the park across the street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does the park have lights?
I don't really know.
One way or the other. Okay, thank you. Second, for the Sushi Palace, which you claim makes so much noise, does it have a liquor license?
No, I don't think so.
Doesn't serve liquor, correct?
But what does that have to do with noise? I don't,
Oh, you don't think there's a correlation between liquor and noise?
I'm not gonna. Yeah, you can bring your own liquor to this, I mean, liquor, people bring beer and wine, I think. They drink in that area, that restaurant.
Okay. Third, with respect to parking, you had indicated that in response to the question about overlap, that you had never had a problem with that at your current facility, right? Correct?
Nope.
Yeah, how many parking spaces are at the current facility?
You know, I don't really know because.
Couple hundred?
I have no idea. There's a lot of businesses there.
Yeah, a couple hundred spaces, or at least, right?
I don't know that that's true. I have no idea.
Okay. Lastly, you had testified about the average attendance during your regular sessions. Now, that, of course, that data you submitted to the board does not show peak attendance at any of those sessions, correct?
No, that's why we said we would want the capacity up to 30, 33, because on occasion, we have had 30 students. That would be peak attendance.
Okay. Now, what about, you have workshops in addition to those regular sessions. Why don't you describe what those are like?
5 times a year, we have senior instructors who visit from out of town. These are senior Iyengar yoga instructors who have many, many years of experience, and they come in and teach weekend workshops that we cancel our regular classes, and we have the workshops instead of the regular classes.
And what kind of attendance do you have at those workshops?
Those are the times generally when that 30 comes into play. We could have, generally on the Friday, we'll have between 15 and 20 folks, and then on the Saturday morning, we might have as many as 30 folks in that workshop.
And how many would you have in, would any of your instructors be doing any instructing? Would they be there in attendance in some fashion?
Sure, but they would be one of the folks that's in that 30. We never exceed that number because the class really isn't beneficial to the students if we go too large in size.
Okay, and you also advertise that the facility is available for parties, is it not?
If there is any advertising like that, it's a mistake because I haven't had, I have not accepted any bookings for parties in the 6 years that I've owned the 7 years that I've owned the property.
Okay.
Never had a party.
Thank you. Have no further questions?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
My name is Carol Cook. I live at 21 Rachel Court in Franklin Park, which is in Franklin Township, and I am one of the other owners, but I would just like to ask a question to help Nagisa clarify, since people have raised the question about what kind of a business this is that doesn't seem very interested in profit. So let me just ask again, Nagisa, Simply Yoga since 1998 has never raised what it charges the students who come there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the price of the location has gone up every year. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And other costs as well of running the studio have also gone up. Is that correct?
Yes, it has.
And when students are in financial difficulty, for example, if someone is temporarily unemployed, does Simply Yoga offer them special arrangements so that they can continue to take classes?
Yes, we do. We don't charge people when they lose their jobs or have financial difficulty. That's part of a yoga culture.
And as the primary owner of the studio before your two partners came in with you, and now still as one of the main owners. You do a great deal of administrative work as well as teaching classes for the studio, is that right?
Yes, I do.
And do you pay yourself a salary for this work?
I don't take a salary for my work. at
So
all.
you're completely uncompensated for this work?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And is that because your motives for running the business are something other than enriching yourself or making a profit?
That's right. For me, it is all about the community and the value of yoga to ourselves and to our friends and the community. And I really am not doing it for the profit. I haven't actually pulled any income from the property or from the studio since I bought it in 7 years ago. So that's.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Sue Rocco. I live at 30 Sycamore Place, which runs along the back of the property where you have open space. Do you have any proposal or plan for any kind of community garden in that open space?
We are not presently contemplating a garden in that open space behind your property.
No kind of community garden where other people would be coming onto the property and doing any kind of gardening or anything in that open space that's behind the houses?
Behind your houses? No.
Okay, thank you.
That was a good question, incidentally. That was a good question.
Alexander Koffing, representing 36 Sycamore Place as a co-owner with my wife.
Can I get that last name? I'm sorry.
I spell it, please, C-O-F-F-E-N-G. Alexander. My wife, Emily Muller, M-U-L-L-E-R. 36 Sycamore Place.
Go ahead. Proceed.
Proceed. Thank you. At the recent previous request for speed bumpers did not go through. We were told we are a quiet neighborhood.
Hold on. This is a point where you ask questions of the witness as to what she testified to. Later on, you can make a statement, but not now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't know.
Well, I don't know if
You
I have
are-
questions
your-
for her.
Your name, please.
Do you?
Excuse
if
me.
I have to make it like a,
Ma'am,
what?
we need your name.
Up here.
Name and address.
Sue Stember. I'm 72 East Countryside, which is in the area. Did you ever hear of any yoga center that was of any good principle that considered themselves a business like other businesses, where people stand there and take in money and there's a, well, did you ever hear of that? Did you ever hear of it in particular with your yoga center? I don't know of anybody who goes to this yoga center who looks at it as a business. It's a health center. And I think some of the...
Ma'am,
Ask the question and let her.
Let her answer.
Well, if you're going to, okay, go ahead.
I think that Sue, you're right. There are yoga centers out there who are intending to make a profit and have that kind of a commercial enterprise mentality. Iyengar yoga, the type of yoga that we honor and the tradition that we study, is really very rarely of that type of enterprise. Most practitioners of Iyengar yoga and similar types of yoga really are doing it because they believe that yoga is a wonderful practice and something that should be shared with the community.
Can I ask another question?
You may ask, yeah.
Do you have the experience of having people come whose health has definitely been much better afterwards? People who come with pain in their spine and their side and whatever, just getting old pain. Do you have that experience?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the truth is most people come to yoga because they have stiffness in their back, their shoulders, aches and pains in their joints and hips, and a lot of stress from their professions. And so most people do come to yoga to get relief from those aches and pains. And I think that our general experience with our students is that they, after taking classes for some period of time, really do have a beneficial effect from taking yoga.
Are you aware of the fact that I'm a student there? I'm your oldest student. Yesterday, I turned 92. Are you aware that I have my original kneecaps, my original hips, and that I probably wouldn't have them? I can guarantee you.
Okay,
Without your yoga center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I can't jump. I'm Christina Clam. I live at 2 Union Street in Kingston.
For the record, she did put that in the form of a question, so.
Are you aware?
I was actually aware that Sue is 92. She's extraordinary.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Well, my question is actually a definition of your workshops. The question is whether there'll be music, drum circles, other things like that with the workshops themselves.
Oh, no. Our Iyengar yoga instructors are extremely, I guess the word would be disciplined. Some might say strict. So there's no music and there's no drums. It is absolutely about practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
You're going to do it outside at all?
Excuse me?
Will there be any outside yoga?
No.
I should have asked, and I apologize for not asking that question.
Yes.
Does anything take place outside the building other than people parking their cars to go into the building?
No.
Okay.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Andrew O'Brien. I live at 10 Shaw Drive, just across the park. You mentioned before about your current location. The Friendly Rental that's near you that has the fumes and the gas smells and all that, is that new?
No, it's not new, but for some reason, there seems to be more activity with the equipment in the last several years. So the amount of activity on the weekends and the amount of equipment being operated behind the studio and next to the studio has increased. I couldn't explain why, it just happens to be the truth.
They've increased in the back, they expanded?
I don't think they've expanded, but they're using the space behind the studio more often, and so there's just a lot of equipment operating behind the door that is the fire exit for the studio.
Okay. Let's see, I guess we already did get that increased amount of sushi consumption, noise increases, okay. So, current location.
It's also the cigarette smokes from the chefs, because the sushi cooks go behind the restaurant and they smoke, and our students don't prefer not to be in a non-smoking environment.
Sure, I agree. I don't smoke either. Interesting, though, but there were restaurants here before, though, right? That maybe the cooks smoke or not. It's okay, you don't have to answer that. I'm pretty sure there were. Parties, you said.
But there have been less successful restaurants. The fact that Sushi Palace is a wonderfully successful restaurant, I'm happy for them. They're wonderful people. I'm glad they're successful. It's just that their success just impedes our ability to have quiet classes. That's all. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything except that they're inconsistent uses for us. That's all. I'm glad he's successful. He's a great guy, and I wish him all the best. Because it's a wonderful business.
It's good food.
Sure.
Parties. You said you don't advertise parties. You don't have anything on your website regarding parties, or.
I think that since there have been two questions, that I'm assuming that there's an error on my website saying that we have parties, but I literally haven't had any in the 7 years that I've been the owner. So, if there are parties, I don't know what they are because I haven't had them. So that there's probably a throwback to something prior to when I owned the studio. So I need to make a correction on the site, it looks like.
7 years you've been the owner and you don't know what's on your website?
So there's an error, yeah. Like I said, it's not really that kind of a business,
And I'm with you. You know, it's interesting, all this conversation about people who benefited from yoga, and I do yoga. It's fantastic. It's very important. But I guess I'm just concerned. It's not the people. It's the cars.
What's the question?
The question is there a bus stop outside of your current yoga studio parking lot?
I don't know.
There is. It's actually almost directly in front of your door. That would give people a great alternative to get there. So I'm assuming there's no bus stop on Sycamore out in front of your parking lot, your new place, right? No. Okay. So if there isn't, then I'm
Now, the way that this is supposed to work is that you ask the question, and she gives the answer, and then you ask another question. It's not, you ask the question, and you give the answer. So ask the question, let her answer, and if she doesn't have an answer, move on to the next question. Don't give your answer.
You're right. You're right.
Okay.
If my wife was here, she would have hit me by now. But okay. So we don't know if there's a bus stop outside of your new location. Is there a bus stop outside of your new location? No. Okay. I answered again. There we go. I'll take my own advice. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Meredith
You
Rogers.
you
again.
did ask some questions
Yes.
before,
I
right?
have one follow-up question based on,
Okay, normally we would like everyone to have a chance first, but one question.
okay, one question. So you mentioned you're not really in it for profit per se. Would you be open to having classes for free for Kingston residents who walk there?
I do need to cover costs, so, you know, I would like to be able to compensate the teachers for their time. And that's really where the lion's share of the revenue goes, is to cover things like utilities and the cost of compensating of the teachers in an extremely modest way. So having everyone come for free would definitely put pressure on the teachers who teach the classes. So I think that I certainly would forego the profit to the studio, which is nominal. So I suppose there's some in between that would be absolutely possible. I don't know how to answer that fully, because I guess I'd have to make sure that the studio was still viable, you know,
I was
in
just,
that way.
the only reason I ask is because you said some of your classes only have 6 people, but you have capacity for 20. Your instructors will still be there, and
Sure.
so that's where that was going.
And, right, and that's probably very, very workable. I just don't think it would really be fair to the teachers who teach to not be compensated at all. So maybe there could be a discount for residents of Kingston. That would be fine with me.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've gotten probably enough questions and
I mean, I should say I
the
didn't.
idea of profit or not profit, so maybe we can, I'm not sure that that's been related necessarily to the suitability of the site for the use. So are there any other questions from any other people? We've had enough of a sample. We'd like to have different questions, try and get more specific information concerning her testimony and the application per se.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kathy Kish. I live at 27 Union Street. I live directly across from where you're planning on putting the yoga studio. And I just wanted to know if you're aware of we have serious traffic problems already in that neighborhood.
Okay, why not wait until we get the traffic testimony?
Well, I just wanted to know if she was aware of that. That's why I
as
think a lot of the residents
said,
are
maybe that-
upset
maybe-
because of the traffic,
Maybe we can address the whole traffic issue at once.
which will
Her
be...
testimony really didn't get into traffic, it was more the operation.
Well, you know, the concern really of all the residents is the cars.
And
the
ma'am,
traffic.
you'll have the opportunity
I
to
know
ask
that.
that of
I know.
the appropriate witness. That's really what it is. The traffic expert, the engineer are going to testify. You'll be able to ask those questions. She's not a traffic
Okay,
expert.
but I think that's why we're also concerned.
And you'll have the opportunity, and so will everyone else, to ask those questions.
Anybody else? All right, then we'll close to the public for this part of for the next witness. What will we have?
I got the site engineer.
And you project how long?
It probably will be a while.
Probably what?
A while.
All right, this will probably be the last witness.
Okay. Can we take 5 before we start?
We can take 5. 5, though, not 55.
So we can move the meeting around.
Move the meeting around. It almost sounds like some decision was made about terminating the evening. Oh, no, he's sitting, that means he's going to go to work.
No, he's gonna go. You know what yoga means? Her definition of it doesn't square with mine. I think I'll ask Siri.
I always think of it's more stretching than it is.
Okay, when we start again, I might want to remind the audience, you might want to focus in on this witness and his testimony, because I'm going to be limiting the discussion to the questioning session.
Your mic's not on.
Again, I'd like you in the audience to focus in on this witness, because when we get to the questioning from the public, we're going to be a little more strict. Questions are dealing with the testimony that you are about to hear. Your opinions, the points that you try and slide in between the questions are fine, but they're not appropriate at this point in the hearing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we swear Mr. Ardman in?
Yes, do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and your name for the record?
First initial F, Mitchell Ardman, A-R-D-M-A-N, licensed professional engineer, principal with the Reynolds Group, and I've
Okay,
testified.
unless you lost your license between 11 o'clock last night and now.
I assume you're still licensed?
I was managed to keep it. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Okay. Mr. Ardman, you are familiar with the subject property, are you not?
Yes, I am.
You are also familiar with the zoning ordinance of the Township of Franklin, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, can you first of all describe the subject property?
Certainly, and as the board knows, and I think alluded to for the public, we each take our piece in this application, and we were going to go through the whole neighborhood and discussion of all the neighbors and how we fit in. For some of the boards, we typically face this way, so if anybody else wanted to see, we have some maps here that'll show an aerial map I'm going to refer to now, the whole neighborhood, then a site map. This map here is A1. This is an exhibit for the planning board.
And I've marked that as A10.
A10, that's correct. So this is an aerial map of the neighborhood. We have the subject property outlined in red. As was previously described, it's an L-shaped property with the frontage along Sycamore, and then it wraps around the back of the approximately 4 lots that also face on Sycamore. To the rear of the property, the long line here and the second property line here, as Nagisa mentioned, that backs up onto the Trap Rock property. Across from the site is the field of the school property. You can see down further towards Route 27, the full building of the old school property and the parking lot associated with it. Very bottom of the plan here, we have Route 27. We have Laurel Avenue approximately 300 feet down from the subject property. Along Laurel Ave, many of the residents that are here back up to our property along Laurel Ave. There are also 2 residences that abut the property along Sycamore. The ones I said to the right of the property also along Sycamore. This property and the directly neighboring area on Sycamore is all in the R20 zone, 20,000 square foot minimum single-family lots. The Laurel Avenue properties which butt up against us are in the R10 zone, 10,000 square foot lots. So that's pretty much a review of the surrounding properties. As you can see, the farm field in the back here, what I call the farm field, is the open spot that's been discussion that is undeveloped at this time.
Mr. Ardman, as I look at the drawings that you have produced, the one thing that's I don't understand is that there seems to be, for the properties that are along Laurel, there seems to be some sort of a dotted dividing line along those properties. Are there lots there that don't face on Laurel?
That's the zone. The zone line actually splits those properties.
That's the zone line.
Yeah, so that's why I discussed the R10 zone. If you're looking at our vicinity in our key map, if that's a line. So on that vicinity key map in the upper right corner of the cover sheet, the lots that face on Laurel, they go all the way kind of through and abut our lot, but the zone line zigs and zags back there. So that's what that line is. But they are full lots that butt up.
Okay, they'll go right from Laurel all the way to the back to the abut.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Shepherd, if you look at the first page in the upper right-hand corner, I think it clearly sort of shows it for you.
Yep, okay, I see, so there's one property there that's on Sycamore that's next to the property that 147.01 has its frontage on Sycamore, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then those other ones, okay, and then starting with 150 and 151, they run all the way from Laurel all the way back to the property, right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Going to the next exhibit now, Peter's marked A11. This is the dimension plan SP2, the same as that is in your set. We've just colored the exhibit with some landscape rendering. This plan depicts the proposed condition. You heard from the architect at a prior meeting. I'll just run through briefly. Again, at the bottom of the plan, the southern end here is Sycamore. The existing house we have shaded in. It's labeled now the proposed yoga studio on that plan because that's the plan for the conversion. But that is the same footprint as was discussed of the existing house that's on the property. You see shaded the properties directly to the right or to the east of us, the 2 single-family houses. The single-family house to the left that we show, as you noted, Mr. Shepherd, that faces on Sycamore, and then the structures which back up to our property to the west, which go out all the way to Laurel. Now, these structures that you see shaded here are not the residences, but the garages and sheds that are at the rear of those properties. Those properties go further out towards Laurel, as you can see in the aerial map. So once again, the yoga studio, the old barn that was discussed also by the architect, this portion of the barn will be staying. There was a small portion that was described that is proposed to be knocked down. There was an existing garage, basically, right where I'm pointing in the middle here. That's dilapidated. It was also scheduled to be demolished. The plan that we have here in the proposed condition is what I'll describe next. The driveway presently really comes directly adjoining the front face of the building and back into the site. What we've done with the design on this is try to keep to more of a residential scale than a commercial scale. We have to balance the two things of having cars onto the site, the requirements of the township for a parking lot and having cars on the site, but also respecting the neighbors and as much as possible trying to screen them. We know the neighbors will have, their opinion on how much we do need to screen and hide this, but that has been the intent, is to do, as least a footprint as we could for the development. On the east side, has been discussed several times, this green area will remain totally undeveloped. The total property is 3.78 acres. So as was brought up, the discussion about how can you develop this? Well, with half-acre lots, and I'll get to it later, there's significant property. It's really the largest single-family property in this stretch, in this area. So as described, we are going to develop this with a driveway coming into the site. This will be just to the right of the existing driveway. It'll bend basically to the west or to the right and then to the parking lot in the rear. Part of the concept was that in breaking this up, so you're not just looking straight up a driveway into the parking lot all the way in the back. The way this driveway is set, you'll basically be looking to the barn, and in the foreground of that will be the detention basin, which will also be planted and landscaped. So that'll be the first feature you see coming into the site. Then you bend into the site and you come back to the parking lot, which as much as possible we've tried to tuck, as you're looking at it from Sycamore, behind the existing building, which will be the yoga studio. For that, and just to clarify the numbers on the parking once again, we are presently showing 18 plus 2 handicapped, or 20 parking spaces total. The number 22 came up. We had discussion at a prior meeting, and with the Historic Commission, we had shaded out basically a spot here in front of the barn, which could be used for access. But there's no reason to keep that shaded out. We've spoken to the applicant, and they're only going to use that at off times and to store other equipment. So that's where the 2 other stalls could go without any additional pavement, and that would be for the total of the 22 stalls that we described. And then to the back of the property, there'll be a gravel area associated with the proposed dwelling. That proposed dwelling, as you heard, is we have labeled as a future phase. That'll be built separately at the north westerly corner of the property. What we've tried to do is save the vegetation. There's 3 mature maple trees, which will be situated just to the east of the existing house. There are trees along the property lines also that we're looking to keep. To the neighbors, again, along Sycamore, the trees back there, we don't plan to touch any of those or the surrounding trees. What we are looking to do to supplement the site design is really enhance the landscaping on the property and to screen the neighboring properties. We understand we are putting this parking lot in an area that abuts the residences on Laurel. For those residents, we're going to put a solid wood fence the full length of the property. It would be a 6-foot-high solid wood fence. Along with that fence, we propose evergreen trees that'll be planted just on our side of the property. So those evergreen trees would be, again, approximately 6 feet high and growing up over time. So we wanted to have, even though the evergreens on themselves will grow in eventually and be thick and full, from day one we wanted to make sure that we had solid screening there, and that's why we put the solid wood fence in as well. There'll be street trees along Sycamore. There'll be as well the neighboring lot to the east here, putting pine trees in that location, again to shield the parking lot from the rear of the property. A question came up at the Historic Commission about extending those or putting a piece of fence in that location, and if that's desired by the neighbor or the board, that would be satisfactory as well. Once again, for the planting plan, as I said, we've incorporated a more naturalized detention basin. It'll basically have a wet wildflower mix that'll be in the bottom of that detention basin, so it won't be just a plain grass or concrete channel mowed basin. It'll blend in with the landscaping, and more landscaping that we've proposed with shrubs and plantings around the proposed yoga studio. I think I mentioned that this back rear corner, as you can see here, to the north and to the east on these long sides, and I think that's what Nagisa was referring to it, that a significant portion of the property is bounded by the quarry property. And once again, on this map, as you can see directly across, that is the field area for the school. As far as the other,
All right, Mitch, starting with the driveway, how wide is the driveway?
yes, good question. So as you're aware, a lot of township standards are in excess of this. Right now, we're proposing a 22-foot wide driveway as you come into the property. And then when it's in a parking area, since there'll be more mobility there, it's a 24-foot wide drive in the parking area. There'll be 9 by 18 parking stalls, and we're actually not proposing curbing along here. We're trying to keep it, again, less site impact with kind of a not making it look as less as a commercial parking lot as possible. For the other site utilities that we have on site, this property actually does have public water and public sewer, and it will continue to have that for the yoga studio as well as the dwelling proposed in the back.
Mitch, for the driveway, I don't know whether you're familiar with the width of Canal Road, but how does the width of the parking lot, do you know how wide Canal Road is?
Canal Road
Yeah. In Franklin, right down,
From here, I mean, a lot of that section, the older section, is probably 18 to 20 feet wide.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so then what you're doing is you're talking about a driveway that's about the same width. It sounds like it's a two-way driveway.
It is a two-way driveway, and I'll give you some relatives here because it came up in some of the staff reviews as well. As this was, developed over the years, and I'll go back to the first exhibit here that I refer to, which is A1. When you're at the intersection of Laurel, there's actually a narrow section of the road between there and our property. It widens out and then kind of narrows back in Sycamore as you go further to the east. You can see here, it shows up pretty clearly here. It's amazing what the aerials will show. This was a subdivision, and I'm showing the new lots as well as the cul-de-sac here that came in some time ago. From that basically line directly to the right, it's really a standard 1990s or whatever it was subdivision plan. That roadway width in that location is 30 feet wide with a sidewalk on one side of the roadway. And you can just see to the east of us.
Curbs too, right?
With curbs,
Yeah.
that's correct. Basically one house removed that it's in that location. Along our frontage, we basically have 24 feet, and then it necks back down for whatever reason for this one lot here in between us to about 18 feet. Again, to the west, it necks down a small area. But in our frontage, in front of the property, and the traffic engineer will get a little more into it, was the site engineer, I want to say, for the turns in and out of this property, there's definitely sufficient width in this lane to come into the site and to make the right turn out of the site. And we'll also discuss, might as well bring it up now, that there would be no issue with a prohibition from making any left turns out of the site onto Sycamore to kind of cut through there. We have been aware, myself, the traffic engineer, that's something, when we met with staff going back at our original TRAS meeting, basically, some of these issues came up. So we know that there has been cut-through traffic issues. So if that's a restriction that's desired to be placed for right turns only out of Sycamore to go back to Laurel, that would be fine as well. So for the driveway area, again, we think that's sufficient, even though it is actually, as cited by your engineer, less than your design standards, to have the 24-foot width for the aisle and the 22-foot width for the driveway before we get to the parking area.
And the aisle, that would be the center lane in the parking lot?
Is 24 feet.
Right.
Yep.
But that's
the
what you're
aisle.
calling the aisle.
That's
Right.
correct. Yep.
And Mitch, in normal shopping centers, they're normally 26 feet, and the drive aisles are 24 to 26 feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And typically, actually, around the buildings, Mr. House likes his 30 feet, as we had an application last night. So in a larger shopping center, they're typically 30 feet wide. Again, not appropriate for this scale development.
Okay, since we have reduced this, is it has it been reviewed, and can emergency vehicles, if there's a fire or somebody has to get on that site, can they get on that site to deal with anything on the property?
They still can get on and to deal with that, and we have not had any, negative comments from the fire official.
Okay.
I just wanted to go over a couple other things as far as total impact to the site. Again, I said we're trying to limit the overall impervious and the overall development of the site. You're permitted in the ordinance here 25% maximum impervious on the property. We have less than 10%. It's 9.8%.
Excuse me.
So at 9.8% versus the 25% that's permitted, it's just 0.37 acres of impervious area for this whole 3.78 acre lot. So again, very limited amount, well under half of the permitted impervious area.
Does that include building coverages also, or is that the driveways?
Driveways, buildings, everything, all impervious, all impervious structures. As far as stormwater management goes, I referred to the basin. This basin has been designed basically to handle the components of stormwater management by reducing peak flows off-site. We're going to drain this full parking lot into that basin, and then it's going to be piped down Sycamore. As many of the neighbors may be familiar, the drainage from the basically big field area largely drains to the north and down the hill there to the quarry area. The area coming across the properties along the front here, along Sycamore, and the front portion of this existing property drain basically to the west, straight across this property onto the neighboring properties. Especially recently in some of these storms when it's been cold and the snow and it not percolating into the ground, there definitely has been water in the area in the front of many of these properties. This will all be graded now, again, will be piped into this detention basin, and it will be piped around all those properties and down to Sycamore at the corner of Laurel. So that will actually be a drainage improvement from this property, even though it is more pavement on the ground. As far as lighting on the property, again, we've tried to keep small-scale lighting in fitting with this development. They're going to be 12-foot high, and we're going to use LED lights. Those kind of a newer standard that's out. Many of you may be familiar with those. They have good, basically directional coverage, meaning you will not see the light source itself. It'll be housed up in a shielded lighting, and then it'll be directly down on the property. As was brought up in the historic meeting, there are different types of LED light. Some are a little whiter and brighter, and some are cold, what they refer to as warmer. And we're perfectly happy to go basically what they call the 30K, which is the warmer color, and to make sure that that is used in this site. So that'll be the lighting for the property.
Are there any provisions to take care of refuse?
Right now, that'll just be inside the studio. It's really, in talking with Nagisa, it doesn't generate anything. You've heard the discussion of the operation. There are no showers, there's no towels, there's no garbage, that kind. It'll be kind of daily pickup in a trash bag to be dealt with, so no dumpsters required.
So we're not proposing any dumpsters or anything else or outside storage of garbage?
That's correct.
And as far as the lighting, when we look at the chart for the classes, basically in the winter time, we would have to keep the parking lot lit Monday through Thursday during the hours of the 5:30 class and the 7:15 class. Saturday, we probably don't have to have the parking lot lit at all. Correct. We probably have to have it lit for the Sunday evening class, and perhaps in the summertime or when the days are longer, the only time we probably need the parking lot lit is for the evening classes. And the proposal would be that the lights would only be on if, in fact, there's a class, correct?
That's correct. And any condition to shut it off any other time is perfectly acceptable. So that's pretty much the site development that we are proposing here. I spoke about the impervious, which we think is critical, the limited nature of development, and again, keeping the bulk of this several acres of property at the rear here, untouched at the back of these 4 residences that abut us. We do realize that the residences on Laurel we do abut, and we've really tried to take care of that by the series of solid fencing as well as the solid evergreen screen that we're proposing.
Okay, along the frontage of the property, you indicate that we're relocating the driveway further east from its present location. Are there any other improvements along the frontage of the property that are being either A, proposed by us or requested by the municipality?
The only thing requested by the municipality is to continue kind of the wider pavement just to the east side of the driveway. So that would basically make the intersection of the driveway and Sycamore Place function a little better, and we're perfectly agreeable to that.
Okay, and you indicated that we're putting some lighting in for the parking lot, which we're required to do. Where is the lighting?
So there are 2 along the driveway as you come into the site, and then there's 2 additional ones on either side of the parking lot.
Okay, and, you know, you talked about the LEDs and all of that. Under the township ordinance, all the light from those lights have to be contained on the site so that there is no spillage on the adjoining properties. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we had some comments from staff about that, and if there's the one light here that shines off the back, and we'll make sure that has a back shield on it so that there is no spillage.
Okay. And again, you indicated that the total impervious coverage of this project as it is being proposed is what?
Is less than 10%, where 25% is permitted, so it's just 0.37 acres.
Okay. Now, earlier this evening, Mr. Shepherd, when we started the meeting, talked about, you know, a residential subdivision, and did you do an analysis of what the impact of a residential subdivision A would look like and what effect it would have as far as coverages on the subject property?
Yes, I did.
Could you stand on the other side?
If you want to.
All right, I'll pass these out.
And so we did do that, as was cited in the application, for reference of what could be developed on this site. This is residential comparison subdivision plan. It's just an exhibit from the meeting, RC1, with the date of 1/5/15. As Peter's passing that out, I'll go over it. So what we did with this plan is we reviewed the subdivision requirements for the R20 zone, which we're in.
Can you mark that? Sorry.
Basically, there are, yep, excuse me, A12. It's been marked, yes. So as the board's aware, there's requirements for frontage, for lot area, for setbacks, and overall coverage for each lot. So to orient again, Sycamore Place at the bottom here, and this at the building here is actually the existing dwelling, which we've shown to be remain, as well as the existing barn that we've discussed to remain. So those are the 2 on the corner. The rest is what would be basically the open field area, as was shown on the other site. So we have a cul-de-sac coming back. We show as the township standard 26-foot wide road and a 50-foot right-of-way. Again, the standard per township and RSIS is for a cul-de-sac at the easterly end. Each of the lots, we've provided a chart on the bottom here as far as minimum lot area is 20,000. Each of the lots comply, setbacks, frontage, etc.
Is the dotted design in the center there, a dash design in the center, is that the building envelope?
That's correct.
Okay.
So on each of these, Mr. Shepherd's referring to, that's the building envelope, which shows the setbacks. So we've shown on each of them basically a driveway coming into garages on either side, the residence, and then some, typical deck or patio that might be in the back of each of those buildings. And as we show, we have the existing house, but a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As was stated in the application, we said 5 or 6. We haven't fully engineered this. If we went through engineering and they said, well, maybe you need to slide some things over for grades or drainage or something like that, I'm not going to tell you. I'm guaranteeing 6, but I'm certain we can get 5 lots here because I've proved here that we meet 6 with all the zoning requirements.
That's 5 including the existing house and barn.
Right, so we're showing 6 including it, and I believe that could be built. but I know a minimum of 5 could be built. So that is a comparison. If we were to build it out this way, obviously significantly more site disturbance. We'd be disturbing that whole several acres of back field, which we are at this point proposing not to disturb. And the impervious coverage, instead of the 0.37 acres, would be 1 acre, and then it'd be 27% of the entire property that would be impervious, because then that would also include the full roadway area as well. And again, the 4 houses on Sycamore, the roadway would back up to the houses, the proposed roadway, and then you'd have houses stacked behind those houses which front on Sycamore. So we don't believe this is, we believe what we are proposing is actually a better planning alternative, and the planner will get into that specifically. But from a site engineer standpoint, I think showing the much reduced level of site impacts with the plan we're showing, especially with the consideration that no further development would be proposed on the lot.
Okay, in addition, if we're building a road, it would be then a municipal road, correct?
That's correct.
And you talked about the width of the road, and it also has to, we have to provide drainage, and we also have to provide lighting, including streetlights.
Yeah, there would probably be at Sycamore and at least in the cul-de-sac, correct.
Okay, and those streetlights would remain on all evening, and again, they would be the responsibility of the municipality, both to maintain the streetlights, the roads, and to take care of all of that.
Right, and again, behind the lots on Sycamore.
And you indicated that the total coverage with that project would be what?
1 acre of impervious, and it would be 27% of the property as opposed to the 9.8% of the property.
Okay. And again, when you did your analysis, just so the record is fairly, we looked at all of the bulk standards, we didn't look at all of the other details, and that 6-lot plan that you have before the board meets all of the bulk standards for the R20 zone.
That's correct.
And in reality, as Mr. Shepherd pointed out with the building envelopes, there's a possibility that even these lots can have houses of a larger size, can have swimming pools and other things that would fit on those properties and still meet the zone requirements.
Certainly, yes.
Mr. Ardman, have you had an opportunity to review the staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application?
Yes, I have.
Somehow I've misplaced them, but...
Yeah.
Okay, we received from the township a report of Mr. Vega, who is the assistant township engineer. Can you please review his report and indicate whether we can be in compliance with his report? Are there any issues with his report? And then ultimately, whether by making any of the changes that are requested in Mr. Vega's report, which is a 8-page report, that we would significantly alter the plan that is being proposed before the board this evening.
Certainly, and just as an overview, I've had a chance to meet with Mr. Vega to review some of the comments, specifically some of the drainage and some of the other comments relating to the site improvements. We have no problem working all these details out for him. What I'm going to ask the board to consider is that he cited your township ordinance standard requirements. We're actually looking to go smaller, as I said, on some of those, including no curb, some smaller driveway widths, in order to make this less impact on the property. If the board decides you want it to full township standards, we can provide that. But that's the only, I would say, relief that we would ask for is for the waivers for those lesser requirements due to we're trying to keep the nature of the development limited.
And just for the record, when Mr. Vega reviews or any of the township engineers review a plan, they tell you what the township standards are and ask you to comply with them, and it's only the board that can say you can deviate from them. He doesn't have the authority to say we can go from 24 feet down to 22 feet. He points out that the standard is 24 and we're looking for 22. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the board would make the decision as to whether we can move in that direction if the board sees it as appropriate.
Correct. If we go to page 2, basically the first 2 that I would ask to review on are items 3 and 4. One is to provide a sidewalk along the southwest side of the parking for access. Again, we don't see, let me just go back, excuse me, the other exhibit. Exhibit A11, the dimension plan. So it would be a sidewalk coming into the property as well. We don't believe that's, necessary or necessarily appropriate. The parking is in the back. I should just say that, and the architect pointed out, but just as a reminder, and there will still be the porch on the front of the property, but there will be a secondary porch at the rear on the north face of the studio, and that'll be the access point. There's a ramp and steps to get in there from the parking lot. So there won't really be people that we envision coming in, walking off the street and up the driveway. So that for your consideration. And the second one is also, again, he's citing for commercial use, provide concrete curb within the parking area and along the driveway. Again, we feel that this matches the neighborhood driveways better without the curbing on it.
Mr. Orman, can you compare the width of the driveway that we are proposing with some typical residential driveways that do have, in fact, two-car garages?
Certainly. On Sycamore, the properties to the left or to the west of us have more narrow driveways, the older houses with that standard. As you go to the subdivision properties to the right, those houses, and it shows up somewhat on the aerial photograph, are basically front-loading. They're not side-loading garages like I saw in the garage. So they're basically the full width of the garages, and those are typically anywhere from approximately 18 feet wide. Some of them on the street that we viewed also have pull-off areas, et cetera, that are over 22, almost to 24 feet wide. So not necessarily typical of the older houses, but the ones on Sycamore in the subdivision, it matches pretty much what they are. So to move on the comments, if I can just skip item 5 is fine. And then items, page 3, 6 through 16 are all fine. And then some of those are technical for some water line and some easements, which are fine. Many of those are the typical bonding and GIS information, and none of those will change the design, as Peter alluded to. On page 4, item 17, I believe they're looking for any easements. Our survey did not turn up any easements or liens or deviations on this property. The traffic impact assessment, again, has been discussed. Let me just go through the technical, then we'll have like an overview on the traffic as well. But items 24 and 25, looking for no parking signs. We can post that. We can stripe. We're not looking to oversign the property again to make it look too commercial here. We understand the boards, and I think Mr. Healy's concern about overlapping parking and how that might affect the site. So if the board feels that no parking signs would be important, they can be put in, or we can see how that works as well.
Also, for the board's edification, I did speak to Mr. House, even though this is not his part of the report, but typically the fire department wants the fire lanes marked and wants no parking signs. Given the character of this neighborhood, he indicated that he would have no problem waiving those initially, with the understanding that if there is a problem, or he would then request that that striping on the ground be put in. He has no problem with it not being put in initially, and as long as the property functions properly, hopefully it'll never be needed. And he understands the aesthetics of it, but he would reserve the right, should he see a problem, to require that, and we're comfortable with that.
On item 25 under that heading, we would be looking for the board, based on the sign, for relief to keep it at the 24-foot aisle instead of the 26-foot. Again, we could go up to the 26 if the board desires. Under the lighting plan, they're actually...
Yeah, can I just cut it just real quick?
Yep.
Just because it relates. The Historic Commission reviewed
Yep.
this, and they did make a comment on the driveway. they stated, it's recommended that any driveway have no curbing and a residential-style apron, as this would minimize any negative visual impact on the historic site and local historic district. How would you respond to that? I guess in particular, I think they're basically saying try to make it as narrow as possible, make it look as much as a residential driveway as possible.
Yes.
So how narrow, in your opinion, could it be and still be safe and function as a commercial driveway?
It's a commercial driveway. The RSIS standards does allow for even roadways in residential developments to go down to 18 to 20 feet wide. Mr. Shepherd asked, are there roadways in town like Canal Road? So roads like that are down to that 18 to 20 feet. So I would say that would be the minimum. I would say 20 feet. If you want to push it to 18, that'd probably push it. But again, so as I said, the neighbors and the Historic Commission and Mr. Dominic can chime in also. They did review the driveways a lot, but I think, they were focusing on some of them that are much smaller. Again, this is on the border of the older houses. This is really the transition between the older houses and the new subdivision. So although it wasn't historic and did have to go there, it's kind of like one property over where it was just made that historic area. And as I said, to the right on Sycamore, though, those driveways are 16, 18, 24 feet wide. They're shorter, and they don't go to a parking lot, but that's their width. So I would say, 20 feet.
Okay. And maybe at the appropriate time, there could be a discussion with staff to determine, we even received that input from staff, John House Engineering, to see what they would feel. So at some point,
Certainly.
we may have that conversation.
Sure. Under lighting again, number 27, says a minimum 0.5-foot candle spread required within the drive aisle proposed. So I discussed the lighting we have is on either side of the driveway, and if you look at the points, so we run the lighting analysis, and we do a point plot. We used to, back when, just kind of draw the circles of light curves, and you'd say it's about a half-a-foot candle, which was close enough 20 years ago, but we need to be a little more specific now, especially addressing any spillover on the neighbors, so we run the computer model. And if you look at it, right up the driveway, the aisle, you don't get quite enough, so some of those points are just below the 0.5. In my opinion, I would say that's where the headlights are showing, and it would have enough lighting. Mr. Vega is correct that it is just below, but I would offer we would not want to put another light up there to have the aisle just be 0.5. If you would like to see that, we could, but that would either be another light or bumping them up from 12 feet to a higher height, and I'm not recommending that we do that. Under landscaping, there are comments about some additional screening, and that is fine. I had a lengthy discussion with him about the appropriate sections of what we call the NJDEP BMP standards. Those are the best management practice standards that govern stormwater and the landscaping in the stormwater area. So I think we're all on the same page now about which of those apply. So
When you say him, who were you referring to?
that's to Mr. Vega.
Okay.
Whose report. So we're on the same page, and we can comply with his desires for that. So that's everything under stormwater. We basically will agree to comply with staff's requirements. So that goes for, on page 5, items 30 to 41, and similarly on 42 to 48. We did a fair amount of soils testing out there, and that's what some of those come up with. I would love it if the soil was better and we dug a pit and it all ran down and percolated into the ground. That's better for everybody. It's just not what you have out in this section of town. You don't have to go far. About 15 miles into South Brunswick, a little further, you hit a lot of sand and you can do it, but not here. So based on the soils we have, this is as good as we can do. We did agree to do one more round of testing, just so Mr. Vega was satisfied we didn't find a better spot on the property, but I'm pretty sure we won't, but we will try. As far as the construction details on page 7, that's fine. We'll comply with all the required standards there. And there was also a question 52, which I did not get to the sign. There is a small sign, it's a 17-square-foot sign. It is at the entrance. It's just to the right side or to the west of the entrance driveway. And it's a wood sign, just painted, and it will not be lit in any way. No uplight, no backlighting, just a small wood sign to be placed at the frontage.
On that topic, and maybe this really is probably more directed to the applicant, getting to the Historic Commission's report, they took exception to the sign, being that it's in a residential neighborhood and in a historic district. And then, so just make note of that, and I think, so the question being, do you need the sign? Then I would follow up with a question basically saying, based on the testimony that was provided, there seems to be an existing long-term customer base. They know where the site is. Why do you need a sign? So,
One, before Peter chimes in, as a potential compromise, there's kind of what I call a chop or an insignia on the sign. And it's a ginkgo leaf, basically, and those are the trees we planted out front. And maybe just the wording would come off, and just that symbol would be on the sign. And that would kind of be a smaller sign then, and still be a landmark, just to make sure nobody missed the driveway.
if you want to modify the proposal, I would submit an exhibit at the next.
Yeah,
This is going to be continued. Do you want to
Yeah,
get something have the board?
I understand what the Historic Commission recommended, and I will have discussions between now and the next meeting with my client regarding that issue.
All right, thank you.
I already sort of touched on John House's report, and again, we can have that conversation, Mr. Healy, with Mr. House to confirm that between now and the next meeting, but he indicated that he would have no problem without the markings, as long as there's not a problem. Yeah, Mr. Ardman, also, the issue that sort of was raised by some of the neighbors and some of the board members concerning the parking lot, and again, we will come back further and discuss the adequacy of the size of the parking lot. Mr. Healy sort of alluded to it. What was your thought process in meeting with the client and designing the parking lot with the number of parking spaces that you propose?
Again, and really more than many clients, she had a pretty good history of who comes to what classes and the number. So after several discussions, we were pretty comfortable with the 20 stalls and now the extra 2 or 22 stalls that we show on site. The overlap between classes is typically that half hour, so I know Mr. Healy brought up, is that going to be a problem with the overlap coming in and out of class when you're not in a big shopping center? And we feel that it was. The traffic engineer will speak more to that as well. There are couples, there are, husband and wife, mother, daughter, et cetera, that come, so that will reduce it. You're not always at 1 per 1 of those. As you know, your ordinance, for many uses, it assumes for churches, for restaurants, et cetera, that multiple people come on in a car. We're not taking all credit for that, but I think some of that would apply to this site. The one time that we did just discuss, as Nagisa said, looking to keep the times the same as they've always been, and it worked well. There's one time on the chart there where the gap is smaller than a half hour. So she's agreed to keep the minimum gap time between any classes at a half hour. So if people are lagging a little bit, even though the testimony was that really doesn't happen, and if people are coming early a little bit, I think a half hour should make everybody comfortable that we're not having those overlapping classes at any of those times, and that the number of stalls should be sufficient on this site as we're showing.
Mitch, there's one other comment in the Historic Commission report that you should comment on. They took no exception to the 2 lights in the parking lot, conditioned upon being warm, which you said you would do.
Yep.
The 2 lights on the driveway, they asked and recommended they be made more residential in nature, and if this was approved, you'd go back to them for approval. Does the applicant have any issue complying with that?
No, that's fine. And again, just for the record, that more residential might bring the light levels down slightly, so we'd want some flexibility on the absolute minimum of the half a foot candle from your ordinance. The only other thing Mr. Healy brought up is one of the items on page 6 about additional screening, and for residents of number 26 Sycamore, which I briefly discussed, but we have some pines there, and we'd be willing to extend those and work with staff to make sure that full screening is provided there.
Okay, and obviously, also Mr. Healy discusses that we are subject to a tree removal, tree replacement calculations, again, for the benefit of the board and perhaps more for the benefit of the public. Can you explain what that means?
Certainly. The township basically has a chart, a ratio for how many trees you're taking down and what percentage do you have to give back 1, 2, 3, or 10 trees. There are a few trees that are coming down. There was one of them is dead that's coming down. There was one in the driveway that needs to come down. But largely we're trying to save them. I can state for the record that what we're putting back would already satisfy them, but I'll make sure I provide that calculation. If there's any question, we'll add additional trees.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I think, Mark, did we get all your comments?
If you didn't, they were minor. So
Okay. And
sir, you agree
obviously,
with
the
my-
affordable housing fee, we understand, and the affordable housing fee would be as to the value of, obviously, the studio should be approved and not for the single-family dwelling.
Two different
fees, yeah.
Two different fees.
Two different calculations.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
You still got to pay
Both.
Right.
But not two, they're different numbers.
Right.
I just want to clarify that. I think we addressed the issue of the dumpster that was in Howard's report, that we are not proposing a dumpster, nor do we think we need one, and we would request that we not provide one. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The police talked about the gap in times, and I think we've dealt with that. And the police also talked about the 24 versus the 26-foot drive aisle. Again, I think we've beat that to death. I'm not going to spend any more time discussing that. I don't think at this juncture, have any more questions of you, Mr. Hardman.
Okay, board.
Nothing, that was good.
Oh, my God, look at that.
We're open to
You
the
must have did a
public.
good job, Mitch.
And in this session, again, questions are limited to the testimony given by this witness. Statements are not appropriate at this time. So if anyone would like to ask questions, please come to the podium and you can form a line in the back. Again, we need
Can
your
I
name
start?
and address. Yep.
Hi, this is Serene Hashim. I live in 47 Laurel Avenue, and I don't know if you see my backyard will be to the 22 parking lot car. My question to you, what's the advantage for me, a mother of 3 children, who I train them to avoid Laurel Avenue and live in the backyard, to have the yoga center, have 12 employees, 3 owners, hundreds of stranger people coming back and forth, over having 6 homes with family, could have children who could play with my kids. So can you tell me what's the advantage for me?
I don't think that question is appropriate of this witness. Perhaps.
He said it's a better deal to have the yoga center when he talked about the 5-unit house. Literally, he said that.
I think the more appropriate, Mr. Armin is also a professional planner, but we do have planning testimony. I'll leave it up to you.
I'll stick to what the testimony was really for in regards of the site development aspect, how much impervious, how much disturbance of the land. Understand your issue with rathering our residents than this use, but that's not really, my testimony was really just, it's a much less intensive impact to the land itself.
Okay, and the 6 feet fence, which is, I will be sitting in my bedroom exposed to the parking lot and sitting in my family room exposed to the parking lot, how far those lights is going to be up the 12 feet light you're talking about?
Right, so
Because
that's...
I live in the back, like my bedroom right to the back, my family room, my kitchen. When
Right.
I moved from New York 15 years ago, I found Laurel Avenue is busy. I changed all my lifestyle to live in the back.
And that's why we're providing both a solid fence and the landscaping to start on this project. We understood that you're out there and to the west of us. So that's why we are putting up the solid fence. And we think that's going to screen, it'll be over the height of the cars, it'll screen the lights from the cars as you're there. So we think we've ameliorated those impacts. And the lighting that we're proposing is down lighting, so we think there'll be minimal impact.
So you think if you come to my room, second floor, you're not going to see the 22 cars parking there, or the light is going to not reflect to my bedroom?
The light, no, I don't think so. I mean, like any street light, you might be able to see it from a distance that it's out there, like the street lights that you see on the, along Laurel or
That's why
right
my
now.
master bedroom was in Laurel, and I get
Right.
designer to make it from the back.
But it's going to be shielded downward, so you won't see the bulb. Some of those, you see the bulb directly. It's going to be a downward light, and it won't spill on your property.
I don't believe that, thanks.
Okay, next.
Hi, so I have a couple questions. The first one is the driveway, are you planning on it being asphalt?
Yes.
Okay, have you considered it being stone like some of the older houses?
Could you just give your name and address again, just for the record, so the record picks that up,
Yep.
please?
Meredith Rogers, 17 Laurel Avenue.
Thank you.
We did briefly consider that. Again, the township for a parking lot generally wants it to be paved. If the board had interest in that, we'd consider it, but I think between the professionals in town, they usually want it paved. Some of the older ones are, but again, in this section, once you go from Sycamore down this east end here, everybody's paved in this area.
Right, but not the older houses. Most of the older houses are stone dust or whatever it is.
That face on Laurel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next door neighbor on the other side, I don't know the number, I don't know if it's 26, is also stone.
Yes.
Okay. Another question, you show your stormwater plan, you were saying the detention pond would have plantings, and those would be wildflowers, did you say?
Yes.
Now, wildflowers don't like a lot of water. Is there an alternative plan or a way to keep planting them or anything like that?
There are actually specifically in the stormwater regulations that we've worked on that have been, the state developed several years ago that specifically direct wet bottom basins. So a lot don't, but there's some mixes that are basically, and we cited on the plan here, it's a basin bottom wetland mix. So that the species that are going to be planted there specifically thrive in that type, so.
Okay. And then the area that's going to be undeveloped, currently has a post rail fence. Are you planning on taking that down?
I think unless it was in disrepair.
It is presently in great disrepair in certain areas, so the intention was to replace it with a similar fence with wire on the post rail, which is used on much of the property so that my two dogs don't run out. That's basically the only change.
So are you planning on mowing that on a regular basis? You're going to turn your dogs out in that, I think it's what, 3
Okay,
acres?
again, it's getting late. That's not his testimony, so please direct your questions to this witness.
Okay, last question. So there's no sidewalk on that part of Sycamore, or is that part of any plans to look at that? Because it's already, difficult to walk on there.
Yeah, we had not, again, we're trying to balance the wider roads and sidewalks with, like you said, lesser and narrower, and so we are not planning a sidewalk, no.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Al Russo, 34 Sycamore Place. Just a question with regard to the parking lot. You mentioned certain things, you're going to have some plantings and Historic Commission. Can you tell me what their recommendations were related to that? Were there any other recommendations? To the
If
board?
you want to know what the Historic Commission's recommendation regarding the parking lot is, they took exception to the commercially designed parking lot in a residential district due to its negative impact on the historic site and the local historic district.
Okay,
That was their comment.
So if I understand that comment, they're basically saying they take exception to the whole site of the parking lot.
That comment says they take exception to the design, because it's a commercial designed parking lot. That's what that comment says.
To the design, but not the parking lot itself? Is that what they had determined?
They take exemption, they take
And I'm
exception.
sorry, I'm asking you a
No,
question.
I was
I
at
know
the
I'm supposed
meeting
to
and
ask
I'm
you.
their staff.
Okay.
They took exception to the parking lot because it was designed to commercial standards.
I see. So if I understand that, again, it's a question to you then, or it's the design as a commercial lot is what they take exception to in total?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name's Doug McLeod. I live at 25 Union Street. Mr. Arman, my questions are about the retention pond. What is the volume of that pond?
That is a good question. What I would suggest is I'll get back to you on specific volume questions on there. I don't have the whole report right handy in front of me, so I can get that detailed information. We've basically, as an overview, we need to size it to handle a series of storms. For a 2-year storm, which is basically one that happens regularly, a 25-year storm, which is less frequent, and a 100-year rainfall event, which is over 8 inches of rain in this area. So all the rain and runoff that would land on the parking lot from that 8-inch rainfall event would get piped to this retention basin. It would hold that volume, and there's an outlet structure that slowly lets it out of there. So it stores the volume of that water, and we have to reduce, we put a small outlet on there to reduce it so it doesn't overflow the pipes going downstream. So for each one of those events, we have to reduce the amount, not only to the amount that's flowing off-site today, but you have to actually be below what's flowing off-site today. And I apologize for not having the specifics handy, but I can get you that information of the actual gallons or cubic or acre feet.
So I'm more concerned about the depth.
Okay.
So a wastewater retention pond like that, depending on where you go, can be anywhere from probably what I've seen 4 to about 16 feet in depth.
Right.
Something that I personally don't want to live beside, and I don't think anyone in this area would.
I agree.
So I think that I personally would like to see a site rendering with a 3D model of that pond to see how badly it affects the current grade.
And the grading plan is shown. We have in our plan sheet SP3, and that needs to be detailed, and it is shown on the plan. So if the depth you're asking for, that I do have the information. So the bottom is 2.5 feet below the very top elevation. It's spread over an area, so I've seen and I've designed those as well for very large development. This is much smaller scale development, so we've tried to keep it to that more modest scale. It's 2.5 feet deep.
Okay, and is there any plans to put a safety barrier around it for the small children in the residential area?
We have not shown a fence around there, but we can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Jim Diaforley from 32 Sycamore again. I have 3 questions, and maybe I missed the first 2, but could you just explain the drainage that's planned on Sycamore? Okay. You mentioned runoff, running that down. Are you referring to a storm sewer?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have in our sheet, and for the board, and if anybody, again, they're on file, the utility plan is SP4. So on that sheet, if you can see it here, I'm showing the detention basin. There's basically a black square which you see. That represents the outlet structure. So the water will be in that basin. That outlet structure will limit how it flows out. Then the pipe will go from there towards Sycamore, and then down Sycamore to the corner of Laurel. At the corner of Laurel, there are existing drainage inlets, and we would tie into those drainage inlets.
Okay, so it would be a storm sewer.
Storm sewer,
Gotcha.
exactly. Yep.
Second question, the narrow part of Sycamore, which I'm quite familiar with, that road was extended in 1978 to allow for a road in front of 26 Sycamore that was
Okay.
built. And again, I may have missed it. Is there a plan to widen that?
No, the only widening would be at the basically entrance portion of our property. There's not planning to widen it towards the intersection of
Okay.
Laurel.
And that's, you mentioned 18 feet.
Approximately, yes.
Right, okay. Last question, and I'm not sure if this has ever happened before, but let's just fast forward. You know, the zoning has changed. Use variance is granted, right? And I'm sure the yoga studio is planning on being around forever. Something happens all the time, goes out of business, okay? What happens to that property now that the variance has been changed to commercial versus residential? Does it go back, Or do they have the option to sell it to someone else?
Well, I can answer that. The variance, if it were granted, is granted for a very specific use, and it would be limited to that use. Any other use besides the yoga studio at the exact conditions, the intensity, and all the other conditions, that's the only thing that could be done. Anything else would have to come back to this board. Or if they wanted to change the conditions, if they wanted to do something different hours or wherever, all the conditions you're talking about. So nothing else could go in there except for that
Understood.
exact use.
And if they go out of business, what happens then when it's vacated?
They're out of business.
Okay, what happens to the property?
The property stays as is unless it goes into disrepair, and then we have the ability, just like any other property, to enforce our ordinances.
Okay, but it stays within that variance, that use variance does not go back to residential.
Right. It stays yoga studio.
Okay, thank you.
Just to answer your question, nothing would preclude, if she decided not to have the yoga studio there, to develop the property residentially, which is a permitted use. We'd have to go in for a subdivision, but that could also happen somewhere down the road. But
I fully understand you, and
Yeah.
that's not part of a
As
use
far as-
variance, that's within the township allowed requirements. I got it.
So the only use variance is for the yoga studio. Nothing else can be done but a yoga studio. And if the yoga studio ceases, I can't go in and put in a barber shop. That's not allowed.
No, I understand that.
Right.
And you've answered the question, so what would be left would be a vacant yoga studio.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan Goldie, 281 Abbey Drive. Now, this is the village of Kingston, and the residents obviously want to maintain the village ambience. And a lot of attention is being paid to the physical.
This is the time for a question.
Okay,
In fact,
the
it's
question
almost-
is, has anybody taken into account the auditory impact of this business on the community? I mean, even a class of 10 people 20 times a week, there's greetings in the parking lot, there's turning the engine on, there's slamming doors. Is there anything in your plan to mitigate that impact?
There's no specifics for that. That's part of the screening that we've put in. Would that mitigate the noise from cars? Not necessarily, but we've tried to, that's part of why we've tucked the parking lot behind the building and screened it and put fencing up to try and screen that from the neighbors.
Is that usually successful for the houses contiguous to the parking area? Do you think it would be successful?
No, you would still hear the cars coming
Yeah.
and going, but again, you can
Door
from
slamming.
Yeah.
Chris Pollard, 39 Laurel Avenue. You've presented two distinct options here. Is there a...
You could take the mic out if you don't want to bend over. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, you've presented two distinct options here. Is there some scenario under which we could see both yoga studio and some combination of residential development, or are they mutually exclusive?
I'll try to respond to that. Our application is for the yoga studio with her house in the back and the open field. The subdivision that we showed there was illustrative of the impact that would have if the yoga studio were not approved. We're not looking, my client is not looking to build single-family houses. She's not a builder. She's not a developer. If this is not approved, somebody else may buy the property and develop it that way. Mr. Ordman's testimony really was to show the impervious coverage impact that a residential subdivision would have vis-a-vis what our proposal is, the lighting impact, and let the board compare the two. But our application is an application for the yoga studio with the house in the back and the open space.
So at this point, there is no intent to actually proceed with the development of the property as
Well-
a residential development?
Our intent is to hopefully get approved for the yoga studio. If we get denied, then who knows what's going to happen.
And I believe in response to a question from the board at the beginning of the meeting, the applicant had agreed to place some type of restriction on the rear of the property so that if this was approved, that rear portion of the property would remain as it is.
Okay, so they are
So basically,
mutually exclusive.
what you're seeing on that board right there, that's what's proposed, as Mr. Lanford just said.
Thanks.
Gerald Muller, 1 Palmer Square, Princeton, representing Elizabeth Romano, 26 Sycamore. She's a contract purchaser. First question, how close is the house immediately to the west?
That house from the property line is approximately 25 feet and approximately 45 feet from the yoga studio.
Okay, thank you. In terms of lighting, when do you expect the lighting will be on? Will it be turned off at any point?
It'll definitely be turned off right after the last class. It will not be kept on at night past that.
Will there be security lighting?
No. There might be just on the front, on the door itself, on the back door, a small light, but no parking lot security lighting.
Okay. And Mr. Lanford had indicated there'd be no light spillage, but certainly somebody looking, like from the second floor of the window, from the woman, for example, who just testified, she will see during the night when the lighting is on and anybody else is looking that there is lighting of this retail facility in this neighborhood, correct?
Yeah, the bulb itself will be hidden in an encasement, unlike many streetlights, but you will still see that light is coming from the source.
Right. And you indicated even with the fence, there would still be noise that could be heard on the other side of the fence.
Sure.
And certainly when there's just vegetation, that has much less noise attenuation impacts, correct?
Yeah, we have both the fence and the landscaping.
Right. But on my client's side, the easterly side of the property, it's just vegetation. There's no fencing.
That's correct, but we've indicated that if that's something your client or the board wishes, that we would add fencing there as well.
I don't know that she's keen on a fence, but the noise attenuation will not be significant from the vegetation itself, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you had indicated earlier that the driveway is to residential scale. Now, I think as you further clarified, with respect to my client's house immediately to the east and to all the houses to the west, the driveways are much, much narrower, correct?
Yeah, the immediate driveways, the ones to the west, and the going back to your clients is more narrow. At the street, it actually is fairly wide. If I'm correct, at the adjoining one. As you go to the east, the driveways are up to 18, 20, even 24 feet wide.
Now, those are very, very short driveways, correct? Because
They're much shorter.
And your driveway is much longer than that.
It is longer,
In fact,
yes.
it's longer, it's wider in most spots than Sycamore itself, correct?
Then the western part is not wider than the eastern part. The eastern part of Sycamore is 30 feet.
Okay. And just going on to a different topic, I believe you had testified that this was the widest lot in the neighborhood. Is that fair to say?
It's the largest single-family lot at this point that I'm aware of.
Now, are you just talking about the front portion along the frontage, or are you talking about the back portion as well?
What I'm referring to is the full 3+ acres of the property.
Oh, okay. Just the front portion, which is what you see from the street.
Right.
Which helps form the streetscape. In fact, that's not as wide as the house, my client's house immediately, my client's lot immediately to the east, correct?
It's fairly similar, but yeah, yours might be slightly wider.
Right. And the others, as you're going in the easterly direction, some of them are not quite as wide, and some of them are even wider, correct?
Most of those appear to be more narrow than your client's or than our property.
But not by a significant amount, correct?
Ours is approximately 160 feet. Your client's is approximately 170 feet. The next one is, they're approximately 120 to 130 feet.
Okay. And just lastly, Mr. Dominic had read from the report of the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission, if I'm getting the name right, that they took exception to the commercially designed lot. How would one design a 20-car parking lot for a retail facility that isn't commercially designed? I don't even know what that means.
Well,
Do you?
what it is that well, I'm going to explain what the commission was saying since I was at the meeting. He can answer that.
Sure.
You could, in a residential neighborhood, build a parking lot that was that big. But you probably wouldn't stripe it, maybe you wouldn't put lights. It's designed for commercial use. They would have the right, if they wanted to, with that single-family house, to build a parking lot of that size, because it would be way under the impervious. But they would not stripe it, and they would probably, maybe the aisle widths wouldn't be marked or anything else. So there's a difference how you may design a commercial versus a residential lot.
And I also think that there's the issue of the curbs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Curbs, the commercial lot would have curbs, and they were, the historical commission, they thought curbs wouldn't be a good.
Okay, so in this
To
case,
answer your question and to kind of piggyback on these, the differences that I was trying to highlight is that we were trying to lessen those typical commercial standards. The drive is more narrow, we have not put curbs in, and we're trying to limit the fire lane parking, yellow painted striping and the excessive signage and things like that. Those would be the things that we've attempted to do to reduce the quote commercial nature of the parking lot.
so the drive aisle has been reduced to 24 feet? From what? What would be the standard that's been reduced from?
The standard aisle where you have parking is 26 feet.
Okay.
And the standard entrance aisle portion without the parking is 24, and we're more narrow than those.
Okay, and the Historic District Commission, what plans did it see? Did it see the plans with the 24-foot drive aisle?
Yeah, it saw that plan,
Okay,
yes.
so, but it doesn't like it because that's commercially designed. So everything you've already done, the commission has seen. So what can you do in addition to change it from a commercially designed parking lot to a non-commercially designed parking lot, whatever that means?
Right.
Which is probably nothing.
Right. The other, from the street view from Sycamore, would be to reduce that driveway more from the 22. As Mr. Healy asked the question, what is the most narrow? And I said between 18 and 20 feet. I mean, Sycamore is that and some other township roads, so I'd be comfortable with reducing that width.
Because that's not the design of the lot itself, that's the design of the access road to the lot. In terms of the lot itself, in fact, there's nothing that you could do that would reduce the, quote, commercial-looking aspect of the lot. It's a 20-car parking lot, period.
It is, and as I've said, we've tucked it behind as much as possible. The lights are the one things that we can't hide anymore from neighbors. I would say that the lot and the cars itself will not be seen from the neighbors on Laurel with the fencing and the landscaping. I'm not saying that about the light itself or about the noise, but visually to see it, you won't from there.
Is that just, but from the second floor you would see it, correct?
Mr. Mueller?
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
Well,
We get it.
Okay. And what about from the street? You'd be able to see it?
On the street you would, but again, we've attempted to tuck it behind the studio and to landscape it. I'm not saying that it would be entirely blocked, but as part of our design, that's an effort that we did made with the landscaping and the shape of the driveway.
And of course, the lighting for the parking lot calls attention to the lot, right?
It helps the visibility, yes.
Yeah, all right, thank you. No further questions?
Before you leave, Mr. Mueller, I just want to clarify one point. You indicated, you referenced the property at 26 as being your client's property. Your client doesn't own the property.
She's the contract purchaser.
Okay, just so the record is clear.
Sure.
You're here on behalf of a contract purchaser, not the owner herself.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
And
thank
I could provide the board with information as to when the closing will take place, if you would like that. Thank you.
Again, Andrew O'Brien, 10 Shell Drive. Are you aware, you mentioned the properties around, the adjacent properties around this proposed site. Are you aware of the, who owns the school, as you call it, the school property and the field and the playground?
It's my understanding that the township itself does, not the Board of Education at this time, but I didn't do full research on that.
We own it.
Yeah, township.
Is that the same as Green Acres? Or
No.
preserved land?
Yes, it's a Green Acres site.
It is a Green Acre site.
Yes.
Great. To try to preserve, okay, good. Regarding the traffic impact assessment, are you aware
We
of?
haven't done traffic.
We haven't done traffic.
No, but he mentioned an assessment of it.
We haven't,
We have its traffic
a little
engineer. that's
premature to
the-
bring it up. We haven't had that presented yet.
Okay, I just was going to ask a question because he brought it up, but we can wait.
You'll get a full opportunity at traffic,
Very good.
all right?
Thank you.
Philomena Russo, 34 Sycamore. I just wanted to clarify one issue you had, just so that you know. Carolyn Floor is the owner of the property next to your property.
What's the question?
I need to clarify this because he brought it up. She is the owner, and she has given us permission to speak in behalf of her, and she will bring a letter to say that, just so that you...
For the record, she can't speak on behalf of somebody who is not here that may be subject to cross-examination. Letters are not admissible.
And she's also represented.
She can't talk if she's represented.
No. This is the actual owner, not the person who is selling.
Oh, okay. Then
okay.
Right.
she can't speak for the person who's the
Even
next time.
she's out of the country, she
Right.
said she would provide documentation. Is that fair enough?
Sure.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
it may not be sure. If there's a document that's going to be provided that can't be cross-examined, it may not be admissible, so.
Well, we don't accept
Right.
that, so the person has to come.
If I can get her from Germany, I will.
Hi, Christina Clam from 2 Union Street in Kingston. The two things to focus on is the drainage again and the sound. Now, in terms of the parking lot, there's also drainable concrete that might also reduce it. Look
Yes.
into that.
Yes. Unfortunately, because the soil is so poor at draining under it, it's not appropriate. Believe me, if I was able to do that, it would have lessened a lot of the headaches with trying to design the detention basin and the extra expense of the client on piping it. So it's just not appropriate because the existing soil is poor.
And the new house, I mean, just the one house will actually affect the drainage as well. So is that being taken into account?
Yeah, we're piping that house forward also, so it makes it to this basin.
Okay. And then in terms of the sound, you said you're going to be a fence and then some shrubbery?
Yeah,
Can it
pine
be
trees.
shrubbery, fence, shrubbery?
I don't know that there's room for that or what else that would, we'll take a look at that. I'm not sure what else that would help for it. But.
I don't think shrubbery will do much of the sound, but I thought if it's shrubbery, then a fence, then shrubbery, it might reduce it just a little bit more in terms of the slamming of the doors and more people talking. Anyway, that's it.
Understand.
Hi there. Liz Chase again, 49 Laurel Avenue. And we're dancing around the subject here, the fact that this is definitely a commercial property that is going into a residential neighborhood.
Questions,
And I
please.
live,
Questions?
What's the question?
You need to use the mic, please. If you're going to go up to there, just take it out so that...
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I live in the property, this is my property right here. And I don't believe that there's going to be fencing and shrubbery planted in this area. And from the view of my house, I look,
All right, wait a second. The testimony is they're going to put a 6-foot wood fence
right.
whole
And
length of the side. So where you're
The lights-
pointing, there will be fence and shrubbery should this be approved.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me clarify. There would definitely be fencing the full length of the property back to the back corner. The shrubbery, the landscaping did stop well past the last parking stall. Basically, it would just be the house that doesn't have additional plantings. When the owner came in, they would kind of do their own. The intent of this was for the parking lot.
but this has nothing, this will not affect the noise that we hear from right along this property line in any stretch of the imagination. And there will still be
Questions.
light pollution.
What are you
Will there
doing
not
to,
be?
what are you doing
What
to
can you
mitigate,
do?
excuse me,
I'm sorry.
questions. What are you doing to mitigate the noise?
Okay.
If that's what you're.
Do you have plans to do anything further to mitigate the noise that this is going to project?
We do not. We don't believe it. We understand that your issue with the cars, but we do not have any other plans.
Okay, and this is going to be 7 days a week. Is that correct? That
That's
There will
correct.
be people using that parking lot until 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. Okay, so that's a commercial property in a residential neighborhood. That's what it comes down to. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Hi, my name is Frank Chaffee. I live in Princeton Junction. May I ask one question? To the best of your knowledge, sir, was this ever used for commercial purposes before, this particular lot of land?
I didn't research that. Our planner might know more about that.
Sue Rocco, 30 Sycamore Place. I just have two quick questions. What kind of evergreen trees are you planning on planting?
Sure, that's a good question. We have, and as required on our planting plan, each that we are proposing, we have to give specific as to the size and the height. So as I'm flipping, just to make sure I get it right. Leland cypress, and those tend to grow tall and fairly quickly and do pretty well in this area. So,
Do you know if they're deer resistant?
I wouldn't at this point claim that anything is deer resistant anymore, even arborvitae. What my landscape architect tells me that this is one of the better species. They have not gotten around to this one that much yet. That's as good as I can.
And if the deer eat them, will they be replaced?
Yeah, as Mr. Dominic can tell you, that is shown on the site plan. It's the condition of the site plan. If it's gone, you're not satisfying the conditions of your plan, so they will need to be replaced.
Okay, that's fine. Sometime you mentioned that at the end of the driveway, there might be a no left turn sign so that people leaving the yoga studio wouldn't turn left and go down Sycamore through the rest of the property.
Yep.
Is there any possible way to enforce that?
That's obviously a township enforcement issue, like
But I
with
mean,
any left turn.
Is
but-
the sign up, it's not a township sign, it's a sign that the property owner puts up?
As in shopping centers or other commercial properties, the property owner can ask the township council to give Title 39 powers, which is the power to issue tickets for violations for those signs, and that can be done.
Is that likely?
We could do it.
Okay.
It's done in shopping, it's done in other places. If it is important enough and the board wants us to request of the governing body to enforce that under Title 39, we can do that.
And what about, that takes into consideration everybody leaving the yoga studio. What about people coming into the studio from that end of the development? Nothing you can do about that.
Right, and then obviously if they're kind of coming from that end, I'm not sure how they might still want to cut through that way.
And I think that question is more appropriate for our traffic consultant.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Maybe this is traffic, but.
Name and address, please. We need your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kara Pothier, 8 Shaw Drive. For the 9:30 a.m. class coming in, how will they come into the yoga studio?
That's traffic.
That's traffic.
And traffic.
Even though it has to do with that no left and trying to get out.
The traffic expert you can ask him questions, he loves questions.
Okay, if there are no other people, then we'll close this portion, and this is going to close the meeting for this evening. So we need to arrange another date.
3/5?
1 month.
Is that you're available? That's.
I have a hearing in Hillsborough that night, but I will make myself available and I'll have somebody else cover.
So
me.
for the public, there'll be no further notice. This will be carried without any notice to 3/5, 7:30.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move. Second.
Meeting adjourned.
That'd be great.